Chat Gang's here. Soren's already gifting people subs. Oh no, this is resub. Thank you for so much, 8 months. Time to jump into it. I am the Magical Mr. Mephisto. Welcome to RantCast, everyone. The Age of Sigmar podcast about RPGs today. So, very special episode. We're going to kind of talk about RPGs, which is something I can't not talk about during RantCast. It's how I personally started. All of my gaming pretty much jumps off from tabletop RPGs. I got into Age of Sigmar because I went over to my friend's house to play TMNT, the pen and paper TMNT game, and he had Warhammer models sitting there on his shelf. That is how I got into Warhammer. And tonight I've got three fantastic guests, all bringing their own perspective and expertise to RPGs. In the top, sort of right above me on the camera, we've got Charlotte. Charlotte, say hello to everyone and introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Charlotte. How much of an introduction should I do?
The whole thing. Where you're from, your love of RPGs, maybe even you give your top 2 or 3 favorite RPGs, the ones you kind of predominantly play.
Well, then, this is going to take a little while. Yeah, let me start myself out.
We got till midnight.
That's 11 o'clock my time. I'm old, and that's past my bedtime.
We'll try to get out before then.
All right, so, yeah, thank you. I am Charlotte. You can find me on the internet at Foxfire22. That is FOXFYRE22. I have done a lot of things in the tabletop role-playing game community over the last about year and a half. It all started off with... what was my first one? It was either a podcast recording of Coriolis with Mud and Blood, or it was an actual play of Symbaroum on an encounter roleplay with one of the hosts of Mud and Blood. I do a lot of things with those guys. They are a review gaming podcast for dark and gritty role-playing games. They've done a lot of neat interviews, a lot of neat APs and one-shots, and a bunch of other neat things with world creation and rules and shit I don't really listen to too often. But if you're into that kind of stuff, go check them out. Mud and Blood Podcast. They are on, I think, all the podcast things around Spotify, and Podbean are two of them that I follow. Aside from that, did a lot with Encounter Roleplay last year for doing AP games. Symbaroum I mentioned. I ran Conan for the first time on it last year. We did Scum and Villainy, which was fun, and a whole bunch of one-shot demo games for some Kickstarter games like Zephyr, which should be coming out in the next month or two, I think.
Scum and Villainy is the that's the like Cowboy Bebop-esque one, right? No?
I do not know because I've never seen Cowboy Bebop, but maybe.
It's really more Star Wars-y.
More Star Wars-y? Okay, all right.
It's like if you made a Venn diagram of Cowboy Bebop and Star Wars, and Scum and Villainy is in the middle.
That's pretty rad. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That was a fun game. I played a doctor on TV.
And then you also have a Valkyrie Gaming Discord. You want to? I think this is pretty awesome. You want to just give a quick pitch on that, real quick, what that is?
Yeah. So I guess it's been about a month and a half now where I finally got the doors open for Valkyrie Gaming. We first started off as like Valkyrie Wargaming as a place for women, both trans and cis, gender fluid, and non-binary wargamers. But then we expanded on to tabletop role-playing as a whole because I'm a huge fan of tabletop role-playing. Sorry, I meant tabletop gaming as a whole because I'm a fan of tabletop role-playing, as well as tabletop wargaming. And I figured that it was a community that needed to be spread far and wide. And slowly we're getting that opened up to more and more people. Our members have kind of slowed down coming to the gates, but I'm hoping to get that picked up here again soon with some new avenues of recruitment. That is where I met Monica. I was on that server. So yeah, it is my goal to eventually be able to expand our Discord server into real life get-togethers once we're allowed to go and meet in the meet space again. Um,
once Big Rona quits putting the beat down on everybody.
yeah,
All right.
even if it's just getting a bunch of people in the same area together to sit and talk about their games, it helps build that community. So later on down the road, people can feel a bit more comfortable about getting together and talking and playing and just socializing regarding their games, because it's not always gaming communities sometimes are not always receptive to people of a gendered minority.
Mm.
It's probably the easiest way I can put it. And this is hopefully an effort to break down those barriers a little bit to get more women out there gaming, because the more of us that there are gaming, the easier it is for other people to get into the hobby.
It's true. It's true, and that's going to be your sort of secret parallel here. Me, a boring white man, will tell you. But no, I think RPGs, and that's really kind of at the heart of why I wanted to do this episode in particular. I think the sort of opportunities for socialization via role playing games, where you literally are in the art of changing who you are and thinking from different perspectives, and that I think is essential to sort of desocializing yourself from this world we live in, and really being able to build empathy with other people. And I think that's what is one of the things that just makes RPGs a fantastic jumping off point for this inclusion and representation. So anything else, or shall I go on to the next?
Well, actually,
Well, actually.
on Saturday at, what is it? What did I say? 1 o'clock my time, 12 o'clock Pacific, April 18th, I am starting a new gaming stream tied in with Valkyrie Gaming as a learn to play stream. So it's another effort for me to try and get people together to play games. So if you have no idea about a game and you want to try it, the stream is perfect for you. It will start to introduce concepts of the game from base level from like minute one. If you want to be on the show to play a game, that is awesome as well. I've got links to that to let people invite. I don't know. I'm not sure how to word all this. I'm doing a thing. Stick around on Saturday and you'll see it.
It's going to be on Twitch, yeah.
Andrew's on this, yes.
Yeah. So I'll be there. Probably playing some like disruptive, like
Dirt
weirdo.
farmer.
Yeah. And then up in my top right, we've got my great friend Katie. We go way back gaming. She's directly suffered my murderous GM wrath.
I think murderous GM wrath is a little bit of an overstatement.
It is.
None of my characters have died.
No, I've only killed. I don't think PC death as like a punishment, or even as like a story thing, should ever be something that a GM aspires towards. I learned young. I don't kill players. Players kill players. Like as a GM. But no, why don't you take us through? I guess your quick intro here, and your history with gaming, your top RPGs, and sort of what you do, and where people can reach you.
My name is Katie. As Andrew said, we go way back, but my history with tabletop role-playing games started 20 years ago. And let us not think too hard about how old that makes me, but I started playing tabletop role-playing games when a friend of mine actually decided to make her own game. Realizing what I know now, I can look back and say, oh, she cribbed pretty heavily from 2nd edition D&D. So yes, I do know what THACO stands for. If I remember anything else from 2nd ed, it's going to be a miracle, because as soon as I got a little bit older, 3.0, 3.5, just really fond memories of the two. I've dabbled in a couple other systems, 13th Age, a little bit of Pathfinder, which, yes, I understand, pretty much the same thing as 3.5, yada yada yada. A little bit of White Wolf, and now 5th edition is kind of my great love of the current era. And that is kind of what brings me here, really, because I started playing an Andrew's game, had a great time with it, and I don't know. Oh, yes, if you want to hear more of this awesome voice and this somewhat offbeat sense of humor, you can find me. I participate in a podcast called Pick a Side, Stupid. Technically, the podcast is still going. There is going to be new episodes every Tuesday, and I am a regular writer and as well as competitor.
The Pick a Side, Stupid is, real quick for those who aren't familiar, this is actually a comedy podcast that essentially you do. Well, what exactly is Pick a Side, Stupid?
Pick a Side, Stupid is a comedic debate podcast where every Friday evening, comedians from the Boston area get together and... How do I describe this? It's set up like the Lincoln Douglas debates, in which a question is posed to you. You have to take one side. Your opponent takes the other. You get a minute to make the best argument you can, then a 30-second rebuttal, and our host is the only arbiter of who is the victor in each podcast, and there's a lot of booing. And if an evening goes by that we don't delve into either shaming somebody's kink or the literary works of Chuck Tingle, it's a miracle.
So this is often, like you said, comedians doing this. So it's the humor is ever present with a very sort of structured form, which is, I think, where that sort of that juxtaposition is where you get a lot of humor.
It's halfway in between a stand-up comedy show and an improv show, and neither pure stand-up comedians nor pure improv actors really want to associate themselves with it, so I think we're doing something right.
And then rounding out tonight's guests, sort of off to the right here, I've got Monica. Monica, why don't you tell Chat Gang about yourself? Get the wine present,
Chat.
I see.
I do, yeah. Hey, Chat Gang. My name is Monica. I am a writer, developer, and designer for Onyx Path Publications. I've worked on Exalted 3rd Edition, I've worked on Science 2nd Edition, I've worked on Trinity Continuum, I've worked on Vampire 20th Edition, I've worked on Vampire 5th Edition, I've worked on Vampire the Requiem, I've worked on Demon the Descent, I've worked on the new Hunter the Vigil. I worked on Deviant, the Renegades. Now I'm trying to remember all the other Chronicles of Darkness stuff I worked on. I worked on a lot of things, guys. Most notably, I am currently the mechanical developer on the team of developers for Exalted Essence, which is the rules light version of Exalted 3rd Edition that is in process right now. I don't know if any of you guys are fans of that or were excited by the press release that came out in December, but I'm one of the people in charge of that, so that's cool. I joined the Valkyrie Gaming group with Charlotte, actually thanks to a friend of mine who was like, a friend of mine from the Malifaux community, and we're pretty used to being like the two women in any Malifaux chat, who was like, you have to join this, here's a link. And I was like, fuck yeah, of course I'm in. So that's been awesome hanging out with everybody there. I'm also the co-host of my podcast, Bonus Experience. My other co-host and I are two queer women, and we talk about game design, game writing, game running. It's not an actual play show. We do sometimes do interviews, but it's really just her and I talk for 30 minutes about some sort of not 101, like in-depth game design, game running, or game writing topic. But it is also a comedy podcast, sort of. I don't know, like, comedy sort of implies that we do bits, and we don't really do bits, but we are funny. I don't know how to describe it. It's a humor podcast.
Y'all are... The humor is ever present. The F-bombs to punctuate, like, runs of thought are fantastic. The rolling gag with Margaret that just...
Yeah.
Like, it took me a few episodes to figure out that Margaret was really an ideal and not a human.
Margaret is actually several people,
Okay.
but Margaret, the concept of Margaret. Margaret is not real. Sorry, guys. She's an idea.
Oh,
She's
fourth
fake.
wall. No.
Margaret is the editor we blame when things go wrong. And probably my favorite gag is that I will tell Margaret to do something, and then it doesn't happen. So, I mean, like, Margaret, put in an air horn sound right now, and then there's just nothing. So we talk about, like, pretty in-depth game stuff, but in a funny way.
Yeah.
And the shows are, they're about half an hour long. Because I didn't really want to do a show that like droned on forever. I thought that would be boring. So it's short, sweet, punchy, and like we focus real tightly on one particular topic, and then like kind of really get into the weeds about like technical stuff. The last episode we recorded, which is not out yet, was actually about character death. So.
Oh man,
yeah.
I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, it'll probably be out in like a month or so. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So,
but anyway,
bookmarked your podcast because that sounds exactly the sort of thing I want to listen to.
It's fantastic. I as a like experienced gamer, I still find out things. I come back to the punk one because I didn't know hope punk was a thing, and so thank you so much for letting me know that this is a thing. But like. It totally like clicks. I'm like, oh yeah, because the world sucks right now, so you'd be pushing against the status quo of things sucking, and how hope would actually be counterculture.
Yeah, that was like a whole movement on Twitter. I think it was last year. Like between 2018 and 2019, like hope punk became like a thing, and then there was a lot of stuff, and then like the idea of that was like a controversy, and that was why we talked about it. Yeah. Twitter informs a lot of what we do on bonus experience, because invariably I will hang out on Twitter, I will get mad at something I saw, I will text Ray, who's my co-host, and I will be like, can you believe what people are saying on Twitter? And then I turn it into an episode. And then, like, that's often what happens there.
Someone was wrong on the internet, get the studio ready.
Right, yeah. Call Margaret.
So
I need to be mad with an audience.
I want you to know that at first I misheard what you were saying, and I heard Pope Punk.
Ooh.
Oh.
That could be fun.
It could be, but as someone who kind of left the Catholic Church behind, I have my doubts.
Well,
I mean, same.
So. No, like an example of hope punk I think that you gave was actually like Undertale, right? Where it was actually, I mean, that's video game, but Undertale being like very much, pacifist playthrough is kind of the playthrough, and that, I mean, that I found that really sort of resonant. And I think the episode's like a year old or something like that, but it still held up. This is where I was like kind of jumping in on your podcast right there, and then I've been addicted since. But yeah, speaking of shows that prattle on for really long amounts of time, welcome to RantCast. But yeah, so tonight, like, I guess, like, I just had one real quick question. Exalted, is that still like hinged to the White Wolf stuff, or did they branch out and like kind of like go off on their own? Because I haven't played Exalted since 2004 or 5, like when it was kind of first coming out, and there was a big mix-up going on with like White Wolf. They were coming out with a new World of Darkness, and then I'm just now trying to get back into some White Wolf gaming.
Right. So short answer is yes. Do you want the long answer?
Yes.
Okay, so the Onyx Path broke off from White Wolf, but also licenses things from White Wolf, which is owned by Paradox, like the people that make Crusader Kings. So Onyx Path writes all the stuff for Exalted, which uses the same proprietary systems that White Wolf invented, but has to basically pitch books and have them approved by White Wolf, which is owned by Paradox. So like Vampire 5th Edition is created by White Wolf, the imprint White Wolf. Do I need to explain the idea of imprints and book publishing and stuff like that to people?
I think that might be a little dry,
Okay.
but
All right, I won't go there. Fine, but the license, like OPP, basically licenses it. So I worked on a V5 book, even though it's owned by White Wolf. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah. So yes, Exalted is still a White Wolf product, but it is produced by the people who work for the Onyx Path.
Mm-hmm.
And Onyx Path owns the IP to Scion, to Trinity Continuum, Aeon, Aberrant, and then a couple of unique, brand new titles, like they came from Beneath the Sea. Adventure with an exclamation point, so you have to say it like Seahawk from She-Ra, so adventure! Yeah, so they own that, and so that has its own system, and it looks very similar to what you would be familiar with if you grew up playing White Wolf games, but it works pretty differently. Mm-hmm. Oh, and what was New World of Darkness became Chronicles of Darkness, and a lot of those are going through a second edition revision, but that also still involves Onyx Path basically getting the licensing and the approval from White Wolf, owned by Paradox. So there you go. That's the long version.
Wow. Yeah, man. What has changed in the World of Darkness? See, I quit playing since basically around Revised. Gehenna was just coming. It was just they were just doing the Gehenna thing, kind of wiping the slate clean and starting with the World of Darkness stuff. Which now I guess like if I don't call it Chronicles of Darkness, then like an angry mob shows up and like throw me in the back.
I don't know if an angry mob is gonna show up, but it's technically more correct.
The best kind of correct.
The best kind of correct.
Yes. Right. And Katie, it looked like you were kind of hanging on to a thought there about Exalted. Before Monica got into it there. No?
No. Exalted is actually one of the White Wolf properties that I've never played, and I don't know if it's just me and my horrifically bad luck, but I have not had good experiences with White Wolf games.
I think that actually kind of leads us to an interesting topic. I've been, like I said, trying to like get back into the World of Darkness just to I have this story that's been kicking around in my head on account of my like actual real night terrors and sleep paralysis. I'm like, oh, I know, I'll run a horror game. Who makes horror games? And then like I had to find out that like everything I know about the World of Darkness is like different, and you know there's two different lines of vampire you could be playing because there's like Requiem, 5th Ed just came out.
3, man.
Three. Oh yeah, V20 as well, right? The 20th.
Yeah, there are 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 3 because there's Vampire 20th Anniversary Edition, which is basically just like the vampire you remember but cleaned up. And then there's Vampire the Requiem, which is the Chronicles of Darkness version. And then there's Vampire 5th Edition.
No, I had to
worked on all of them.
That's fantastic. No, actually, it was your chat that I asked about, like, okay, I'm thinking about running Vampire, and then, like, where do I even begin? And, like, Terry, I believe it was like, it sent some links, and you sent some links, and then I did a bunch of research for, like, about a week, and I think I've narrowed it down to 5th edition, but over the course of looking into it, I one of the things I thought that was immediately awesome, this ties into what you were kind of mentioning, Katie, is the bad experiences. One thing I loved about Vampire 5th edition is they have essentially codified game themes on the character sheet. And I think that that's really important for modern gaming. We've seen these like sort of consent like gaming checklists that like a lot of that have become really like in usage with a lot of like D&D games and other RPG, especially since we're Roll20 is kind of becoming the way a lot of us play our games, because face it, many of us have become adults. We've scattered across the country and our old gaming groups. That's how we play. Katie is Roll20. You're in Boston and I'm in Wisconsin, and Sam's in Minnesota. Yeah, we got a guy in California. So like literally the whole we've been able to kind of keep our a version of our old college gaming group together through the magic of the internet. But I think that there is sort of this changing of the guard, this sort of new culture in RPGs, notably because they're so popular now. I don't even think we can claim RPGs as nerd anymore. I think they're just pop culture, and I specifically blame Critical Role and a little bit of Stranger Things. But that does mean that like we're getting a lot of attention. This sort of formerly just nerds sort of subculture has become culture. and with culture, you get a wider net. You get a lot more people interested. I don't think you can really assume a lot going into a game anymore. So this themes thing on the character sheet, I think, man, that's really cool because vampires specifically, White Wolf games, these horror games can be really, they have some real cringe content sometimes.
Yes, they do.
And you yourself, you said, Katie, you haven't had any, like, you just tend to not have good experiences with it, and
I think it may mostly be me. Well, you know me, I can't take anything terribly seriously.
yes.
And for the number of vampire games that I've tried to play, and don't get me started on the LARPers, but...
LARP shaming. We'll start the drinking game now. Anytime we make fun of LARPers, anytime I manage to talk about Ossiarch Bone Reapers anyway while we're talking about RPGs, chat gang, go ahead and have a drink. No,
Okay, yes, I will drink.
yeah, no, there's, I don't know, like, there is sort of like maybe like continue, yeah.
There is a certain ridiculousness, if you'll pardon my saying so, to any RPG. I think there is a certain amount of unreality that goes along with every game, and I feel like if you are taking everything too seriously, it's entirely possible to just miss the point entirely and not have any fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, games are supposed to be fun, right?
Yeah, and maybe some people just have fun by pretending to be angry all the time, but I can't do that.
Yeah, the murder hobo.
Laugh.
Yeah, the classic murder hobo mentality where, like, you gotta be edgelords killing everything all the time, right? I do think that we've developed a little bit away from those stereotypes. I haven't heard anything from you in a little bit, Charlotte. Any kind of thoughts on this current meandering topic we're on?
Probably. Monica, I'm not sure if you're in the Twitch chat, but people want to know what your favorite clan in Vampire is.
Yeah, I am in the Twitch chat. I'm Saris Winterblood there. It's Bruja.
Okay.
Couldn't tell from the jacket. I think...
Punk rock vampires.
Well, I mean, yeah. It's pretty metal.
The clan where you always have to be angry to play, or that's how people see it.
It's not that they have to be angry, it's
You're
that
gonna have to
they're...
be more specific than that.
No, it's weird because, like, with Vampire, like I said, you have this sort of this leaning cringe themes that could come up. I was really worried about that, but as I looked a little bit more into 5th edition, I was like, okay, cool. Exalted doesn't really have that issue because Exalted is very much like almost like a fantasy game. Like it's sort of over the top. I'm completely not familiar with Exalted. Well, I guess, Monica, why don't you take us where, like, how Exalted differs from the World of Difference and where they've gone
So
of late.
do we want to open this can of worms right now?
We already have.
Okay.
Depends on how much wine you've had. Have you had enough wine to open this can of worms?
I'm working on it. I will talk about Exalted Happily Sober and just get increasingly more unfocused and excited the more wine I've had.
You're on the correct podcast.
Truly. You want the gist of the question is, how does Exalted differ from regular fantasy?
Yeah, regular fantasy, and how does it stand apart from, like, the sort of standard White Wolf tropes, I guess I would call them?
Okay, so... Alright, so... Exalted is a game about playing extremely powerful characters. The titular Exalted are humans who have received a spark of divine power that makes them capitally exalted, and the Exalts themselves were basically super weapons from an ancient war to defeat the things that made the universe, which they succeeded at. And then the rest of the lore is basically this cycle of power and decline, where the people in power eventually become corrupt over time, abuse their power, and then get overthrown, lather, rinse, repeat, until, like, the the Solar Exalted, the sort of most protagonist. I don't want to say that. Exalted fans will come for me. Like, they're the core book splat. They're the core book splat. They're the ones that are like the easiest to play, but they're also supposed to be the most powerful. And they are the former rulers of the world. They got sealed away, and now they've come back, and that's like into a world that fucking hates them. And that's sort of where you begin with Exalted. So it is. So the game, like, it differs from like a D&D fantasy. Because rather than lean into Western themes like knights, wizards, with like a European type theme, it goes Eastern and takes inspiration from Japan, from Korea, from China, from India, from the Pacific Islands, like all Eastern things, which, if I'm completely honest, in past editions was pretty appropriative. Like, it was that sort of idea, but written by a bunch of white people. Not a great look.
Yeah.
But it was different. And like, Exalted in 2001 had a black woman on the cover. Exalted 3rd edition has a trans man on the cover. Like, it was always kind of transgressive in its progressiveness, like pushing that envelope, and like putting like gay characters in example text and stuff like that. Like, it has done that consistently since the beginning. So it did that kind of, you know how like White Wolf was kind of like progressively edgy in the 90s and the early 2000s? It did that and leaned into it in a way that like stodgy D&D didn't. And like, I know 5th edition has made strides in that, so I'm not calling out current D&D, but like in the past, sure, it made other fantasy games look stodgy by comparison. Yeah. Because it was sexy and flashy, and they're like, White Wolf did the whole like, there's titties in this book. Like, you can't see my Exalted books, but they're right over there. And I probably could grab one and like hold up a picture of boobs for you. Right. Because
like on accident. Yeah,
like maybe not on accident, maybe even on purpose. Like, naked people were pretty prominent in Exalted art, and so it was like transgressive in a cool way, the way a lot of White Wolf stuff was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, White Wolf kind of, I think, made bank on being counterculture early. Like, that was really, I think that was really kind of their niche. I mean, even the idea of like like goth punk as like, that's your, like, that's the, like, what a niche of niche markets to try to like cater to in RPGs. You know, that's like the initial like pitch, is to try to get like the Chicago goth scene to play your game, like. And then to kind of, so like, and then they took that even more. They kind of took that even further, and I remember my original read on Exalted was like, oh, this is for like the anime, like people who want to play D&D, but they really want to play with Buster Swords and stuff instead.
I mean, yes, that too. Like, so I got sold on playing Exalted. This is the most embarrassing sentence I think I may say all night, but by a member of my college improv group who told me it was an anime game.
Well, like,
which it isn't really.
I can't throw stones.
Okay, fair.
All my games devolve into my influences, which are like, you know, like weird like lit nerd stuff, and then like all of the anime and video games that I've ever consumed. So the game.
Yeah, I want you to know that every time you devolve into some kind of anime sidetrack, I am sitting in the corner looking at my dice and thinking, God damn it.
Why?
I watch some of this shit.
Oh man, like the last campaign was really heavily inspired by Xenogears, and like, so like there's literally like god weapons hiding under the planet, and I blew up 2 moons and killed 2 gods over the course of one whole game. I shouldn't say I did. The party killed one of them. But they always go like really big. One of the struggles I'm currently having with our game, Katie, is that like I didn't jump the shark early enough, and so now I'm like, I've been playing this, like trying to like run a straight game, like be really fantasy and like straightforward, and I'm like, I can't, I don't know, I'm out of my depth, man. I need to blow up like a moon, something to get this campaign back on track.
Okay, we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, okay. But there's got to be a small challenge. Like you said, you're actually like working mechanically on this book. There's going to be a small challenge in sort of taking out that like appropriative, sort of trend in previous editions and making it something more yet further like sort of a progressive game.
Yeah, I mean, the third edition line has taken really big strides to hiring people of color and hiring people of other cultures, and not just stacking the deck with a whole bunch of white people who looked at Wikipedia once.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of bringing those people onto the project I'm working on too. I'm not going to take any credit for doing that. That wasn't me. That was me picking people who were like, "You're good at this. You're good at this. You come with me,"
Mm-hmm.
So that's I can't take credit for any of that. But I can talk about rules. I can talk about plenty. And I want to go back to Exalted as an anime game because it's true, but it's also not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's anime in the sense that, like, you can have an oversized sword or a giant axe or whatever, like, very JRPG-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And it's anime in that, like, everyone gets to jump really high and have, like, a Super Saiyan aura and charge up your thing and yell cool attack names and stuff like that, but that's also very fighting gamey. Like, that's not, I don't think any of these things are particularly limited to anime. Because, like, Keep Your Hands Off Isaac is also an anime, just putting that out there.
Well,
Which, I don't know if that reference hit anybody else, but
I missed it.
It's a slice of life show. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the they actually have like a Twitch emoji. It's the Mr. Meth Not a Weeb. Even though I constantly talk about anime because like I am not, all my knowledge on anime is trapped in the year 2005 basically, and so if it's happened since, I pretty much don't know it. Yeah, thanks, Frank. There's kind of like a subject I think that we're kind of dancing around here with engaging sort of new players in. You can go sort of with layers in this, engaging new players into a new game, and game could be like a new system. Like, say we play a bunch of D&D. Well, what if we want to play Exalted now? How do I get people to engage, like, in Exalted? What if they're brand new players to RPGs in general? You're actually, Charlotte. You're actually like kind of running this sort of new player focused stream this coming weekend. So maybe you can like sort of lead off on this one. With like how what challenges are like getting people to engage on and take it in any direction you want. Game can mean your game, your campaign, or we can mean system, setting, etc.
I don't know. I find the hardest part of getting people interested in playing them is getting them interested in playing them. I feel that people have a preconception going into role-playing games. Either they know what they are or they don't, and if they don't, many of them aren't too keen on checking it out because once upon a time, it was for the geeks and the nerds. But like you said earlier, with shows like Critical Role and LA by Night, it has brought more people into the hobby, which in the end for any kind of community is better when there's more. But I do notice that in a lot of groups, you have people who get stuck on a single system, a single game. And it is the most popular and well-known game out there right now, and it is my job to try and chip those people away and get them into other games. Because one game you'll never see on my stream is Dungeons & Dragons, because there are so many other streams that cater to that. You'll see me running stuff like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Wrath and Glory, which just came out today, Soulbound, which we're due to see in about 3 weeks from now. I'm big into the Warhammer stuff. So the Warhammer role-playing games, the 3 of them that are out there now, they're huge for me. It's neat to see them all coming out, especially Soulbound. Like, you and I are part of the playtest, so we've seen how this game works, and it is phenomenal. Like, I love everything about it that I've seen so far.
Without mindful of an NDA, I think it's a great bridge game. And like when you when you make a game, I think this is asked and answered right at this point, but you want bridges to your game, from other places. So we want as many bridges built away from D&D as possible these days, like getting people to go, okay, you know what that is because you saw Stranger Things and ha 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 Demigorgons, and then maybe you checked out a few episodes of like Critical Role. Well, now come play this game that's going to be familiar, but it's going to offer something a little different.
Yeah, anybody, well, I don't want to say anybody, but there's many people who are in our, for lack of a better term, our nerd culture that know what Warhammer is. So they've heard about it, they may have seen the stuff in their gaming stores. It's an easier sell than some of the other ones. And like Monica was talking about Exalted, when you're talking about the Solar Exalted, when you're given an explanation of what they are, I see Stormcast.
Yeah.
Except that people like Stormcast.
Like in setting, people like Stormcast.
Yeah.
Mostly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go back to the Exalted thing for a second. That was one of my first RPGs I played.
Yeah.
And the first time I played it was when we were we were waiting for our trades course in the Army. So after basic training, while we were waiting for our next course to start, one of the guys there had his Exalted books. So like I've got a copy of Exalted First Edition upstairs right now. And that was coming on the heels of me spending a hell of a lot of time on Vampire Revised Edition. And like those books right now are stacking up my monitor probably about half a foot. So like the whole White Wolf vampire thing is a warm moment from my past. Like I was telling people in the chat there, Lore by Night is a pretty wicked podcast to check out for a lot of vampire lore over the ages. He goes through a lot of the history of the different clans and sects and whatnot, and Toreador forever.
Man, I don't think I can say which clan I like, or I'll maybe get I'll lose all my viewers right now. Malkavian, Malkavian.
Nothing wrong with that. You know what? That was probably my first clan that I enjoyed, and then it was Ravnos, and then Toreador with a slash of Daughters of Cacophony. Cacophony, depending on how you pronounce it.
I also like Tzimisce, but they're Sabbat, and I hate Sabbat. They're just, it's there's a hypocrisy to Sabbat that it just doesn't jive with me, and the Catholic, the parallels to the Catholic Church, where I just oh cool, I'm playing some stooge for the Catholic Church, basically, except I'm a vampire. No, thank you.
It's funny they say that. I am not religious in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. Spiritual maybe, but religious no. But any chance I get to play a religious fanatic, I'm there. Sisters of Battle, I am there. Inquisitors, I am there.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's sort of that ironic enjoyment of the thing, and you can really sort of dismantle the tropes and reimagine them and rebuild them. I get it. I dig it. Yeah. I like Tzimisce because Count Dracula, man. Come on. I found out Dracula was Tzimisce, and I'm there. But
done.
Yeah. But my ST wouldn't let me play Tzimisce, so I did the next best thing, which was Malkavian, and then
you had a storyteller who just wouldn't let you play as a certain clan?
Yes.
Death to them.
Why?
Well,
why death, or why wouldn't?
No. Why wouldn't they let you?
They didn't like Tzimisce, the whole I'm running a Camarilla game, so you can't play a Sabbat thing, and I didn't know enough to know about anti-tribu yet. Well, I could be a Tzimisce anti-tribu, or anarchs and stuff are a thing. My sire could have said peace out, and I grew up in a trash can next to a biker bar, and it's all Brujah and anarchs. Let's party. But no, so my SC just I think there was some latent dislike of the Tzimisce or whatever. Their main thing was they didn't want a Sabbat character in the party. So I did the fuck you, I'm gonna play the crazy guy thing, because that's me. The contrarian.
That tracks.
Yeah. And then from there I really, really loved that the sort of the nuance that I was able to not realize I could unlock with Malkavian. So I had a character named Nails, because he didn't remember his like real name, and I wasn't just the weird like I'm crazy and random, like that guy. It was really this drawing on my like insomnia and how I sort of like feel like every now and then I like slip into just a different reality when I've gone sleep deprived for too long, and so I really played up that and drew from what I knew and had I had a blast, and that's why Malkavian like kind of rose to the top from there. But I've always had that like, yo man, Dracula. So Zamisi still stick around. What about I think now everyone's got to say their favorite clan, and then only one's missing out. Katie.
Oh, Bruja.
Bruja, of course. So we got 2 Bruja. It was at a Toreador and a Malkavian. So we could get a pretty good a coterie going, I think.
Yeah, we got a coterie right here.
Don't worry, I'll see stuff. That's what I always liked to give storytellers and GMs more excuse to describe more stuff. That's why I love playing like high perception characters. It's not to find the traps. It's because I want to force my GM to describe more things. So I always like that. I always like that aspect of Malkavians is like they were always kind of like aware and plugged in, even if it was kind of crazy. Does it?
Hang on, I think my cat is trying to get into my office.
Fair enough. Let the floof reign. Katie catches her lets her cat into the office. Monica, getting people to engage with new systems. Do you have anything to new systems or games or engaging your players? You actually talked about this with your co-host on your podcast recently, a little bit.
I'm trying to remember because we've talked about building engagement, and we've talked about building trust, and we've talked about like trying to loop in new people. Yeah, I think the most recent one was about new people, but it was more about like running for new people, and writing for new people, and then like if you were in charge of a gaming project, how do you deal with brand new writers? Like that was like my little bit at the end where I rambled for too long incoherently because that's what happens when I don't script myself. So I think the key to getting new people invested in playing something else is to appeal to the things they like, which sounds like non-advice, but I think it's probably also the best advice. So like, if your buddy who you want to play something other than D&D fucking loves Mass Effect, well then you should probably introduce them to a sci-fi game. If they're a big Firefly fan, like Scum and Villainy right there. Like if they're trying to think of another genre, like if they want more high-flying action than D&D tends to mechanically support, then Exalted's right there. If they really like Percy Jackson, Scion is right there. Or
if they wanted to do something Wild West, you could do Deadlands.
Deadlands, yeah, or Through the Breach. If they're really into like Dishonored and Fallen London, Blades in the Dark. If you really like wheels are spinning. I'm trying to think of like Warhammer, play any one of the Warhammer games.
Right.
I think it's pretty easy to The Magicians, Mage the Awakening, or probably not the Ascension, that's pretty crunchy. But like you also have to then consider like the mechanical barrier to entry and how willing the player is to learn the new thing. Like, I don't particularly recommend Exalted 3rd Edition for new people, unfortunately, even though I am a person who works on the line, because it's very mechanically intense. It's got a lot of rules, it's got a lot of moving parts, character creation is very involved, and it does require some degree of system mastery, like some understanding of how everything works together in order to, like, make a good character. And I don't mean like a wins every fight good character. I mean like does the thing it wants to do good character, which is why Essence is being created. The whole Exalted Essence project is to sort of remove that barrier to entry and to introduce it to everyone. And so a lot of the development time has been spent trying to figure out how to keep knocking that barrier to entry down to get it as simple as we can possibly make it and as welcoming to as many people as we possibly can, while still sort of keeping the things from 3rd edition that are enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that's been a task, man. It's been pretty hard. I think we're tremendously succeeding, but it's been really hard.
Yeah. I think that's what Age of Sigmar. I think that's one of the things that's made Age of Sigmar, is switching kind of the core of what my show often is about. I think that's one of the things that's made Age of Sigmar exceedingly successful as like a war game compared to like the much crunchier Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Even like 40K has gone pretty elaborate. With Age of Sigmar, it's like, nah, like you don't need to worry about wheeling and guessing distances anymore. You know, play by intent, roll your dice, and watch models explode off the table. Like, you know, pretty straightforward. I think that you can have people often conflate great game with complicated game, and I simply think that's a misnomer. I mean, you want to codify some stuff in rules, because I found as a GM, the biggest question I get with like new players, and I've since like given up on running new players because I'm curmudgeonly and old these days. But like the big question I often get every game is like, well, what can I do? And you're like, anything you can imagine. But you want to actually have some rule that suggests what they can do, you know?
Right. I think when people ask, what can I do? It's like a customer service question where like when someone's like, what time is the 2:00 parade or whatever, where the question is not really what can I do, but where do I begin?
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah. I think when someone says, what can I do? They mean, where do I begin? Like, what action should I take? How do I approach this problem? How do I roll for this thing? Or like, what do I need to consider in order to make my character to do the thing I want to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I heard Charlotte agreeing with me.
Yeah. And then
yeah, like
agreeing with you, but I did it quietly.
Charlotte, you have a thought there?
Yeah, when you first get people into RPGs, it takes a little while for them to get settled in to be able to interact. Like, if they're not used to it, for a lot of people, it's a weird situation to be in. It's like, okay, so I've got this human cleric in front of me, or apparently this human cleric on this piece of paper. Now what? How do I do this? Like, do I say, Talia, my cleric, goes forward and tries to cleanse the world of evil? Well, eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Might be the end goal, but you're sitting in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting around the table with a bunch of friends. You know, you hear the music in the background. The server is bringing you your beer that you just asked for. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? What are your teammates doing? You know, it's trying to guide them in the proper direction to get them going. It's like getting a car over that first little bump. Mm-hmm. And once they're over that bump and starting to go downhill, then they start to pick up speed. They get comfortable with it. Once they get to know the people that they're playing with as well, it becomes a lot easier. Like, even for me, like, I've done my fair share of role-playing in the last little while. And a few weeks ago, I was invited to do, it was an actual play recording with the developers from Cubicle 7, and we were doing a play test of a new adventure that's coming out. And we had it broken up into 2 sessions. Now, I've talked to a lot of these people before on a lot of the Discords that I manage, but I've never seen them on camera. I've never interacted in that way. So sitting into a new table, they've all played together. They know each other, so they were able to roll with it, whereas I was kind of quiet. Wasn't sure how me or my character fit into it yet at that point, but then on the second round, on the second game that we played, then I got more into it because I was comfortable with the people. So that's part of the challenge as well, is getting people comfortable. And honestly, that's where I think a 0 session is super important, because you're not under any pressure at that point to play the game. You're there to learn the game. You're there to set the boundaries for you and the people that you play with, and get your characters sorted out, and your group concept, which for me I think is a huge part of the gaming experience as well. How does my character fit in with everybody else? How do we work together? Do we have one little murder hobo who's off on the side here who just wants to stab and pillage everything that they can find, while this other person is trying to save the world? right? Your characters at the very start are worlds apart, and getting them to work together sometimes might not always work to be able to have a functional party. But if you go down saying, okay, so where do you think your characters fit as a group? Are you a band of mercenaries? Are you outlaws? Are you Doctors Without Borders? What is your goal? What brought you together? And once you're able to say what brought you together, you're able to work together to create characters that work as a group. You may have some issues between the group, but that's just normal for anything else. But you're not one person's here, one person's there. You're more closer to the center. So when you have that discussion going into a game, anybody who's new to the group or new to the system has a chance to settle in and start talking to the people that they're going to be spending 3 hours a week for the next year around a table.
Right.
I just kind of went off. I hope that answered the question.
No, that's really great, Katie. You from your perspective, how do you get engaged with a game? Like, what is it? Yeah. Sorry.
Oh boy. This might be a slightly different perspective on this, but for me, the easiest way to engage with a game is to trust that it's going to tell a good story.
So, story.
Yep. There has to be a story there, and I have to have, some amount of agency over my character. Oh, this is going to sound really pretentious, and you can boo me off the stream if you like, but for me, role-playing is all about building the character. And as a writer, a lot of what I do is just, okay, what is my character going to do? How is she going to react to X, Y, and Z? And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir because you've seen me do all of this in the games that you've run, but...
Well, Tess is... your assassin, Tessana Penhallow, is one of, in my experience as a GM, is one of my absolute favorite characters because, that collective storytelling experience, that's why I write, my little fiction and books, yada, yada, yada. Something that D&D and Exalted and Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game and all these games we've been talking about do. One of the things that they really do that other forms of art I don't think replicate well is that back and forth. I mean, yeah, improv acting to an extent, but that collective storytelling experience, that shared experience of a story together, often I think people forget that the game master is a player as well. And game masters, you do yourself a lot of justice, or storytellers, or DMs, whatever you want your vernacular is. You do yourself a lot more justice if you thought of yourself as a player as well, because you're not lording over the table, dice in one hand and story in the other, and you're sitting at the table with your group sharing this experience. The best plot lines that came out of any of my games are often character driven ones. I have my story, but it'll always be me kind of having to recalibrate. Speaking of Mass Effect, calibrations, it'll always be me.
Are you seeing the Garrus in the background?
Or... I can't get over the Pinkie Pie and Spike, man.
Oh shit.
But yeah, that sort of recalibrating and riffing off of each other is really what I kind of live for, and that's when what you're talking about, that going in that character mentality, that character build mentality, that gives everybody at the table, every player, ways to engage each other, which is really what it's about for me. So, but we actually,
basically,
yeah, go on.
I guess what I'm saying is, I would play anything if I knew and trusted the people I was playing with.
And that's where.
Speaking of which,
go on. Yeah.
I have
Tales of Equestria.
Yeah, I want to do this. I want to run a Tales of Equestria one-shot. I have some more research to do, and
I've actually brought that up about running that on my Learn to Play stream in the future.
There's a... I think y'all should exchange information, because that could be a lot of fun.
Yes, we should. Would you drop me an invite to your Discord server so I can get in on this?
Darn rights. Yeah, just to steal that for a second, a lot of the games that I love to play are dark and gritty games, and I figured if I'm going to try and learn games and teach people games and be able to have people learn from the streams and the recordings, being able to run games for younger audiences, I think it needs to happen. A lot of times, depending on your group, when you bring up My Little Pony RPG, it is not met with a lot of, I want to try that.
I think it's important to be willing to take chances, and there are RPG systems that are devoted entirely to, cartoony concepts. There's Toon, there's Besom, which I only just figured out a couple weeks ago stands for Big Eyes, Small Mouth.
Yeah, that was like...
I
that...
have a history with Besom, which is actually an anime game. But anyway, carry on.
It is actually an anime game, and just the over-the-top, the no real depth to it, the bright colors. I think there's something there. I think, especially, the world right now is a really uncertain place, and I think if we can all just take a step back and play something that's just going to be brightly colored, maybe a little sugary, but just fun and happy.
Punk.
I think there's a lot of value in that, and especially now.
I agree. I think there's a lot of value in RPGs right now. I can't play Age of Sigmar currently. We've skipped a couple tournaments, so I've really been reconnecting myself with RPGs and trying to find my passion for telling and engaging with the story again and all my players again. And as soon as this move is over, I promise we'll pick back up, Katie. No, you
I
mentioned...
will hold you to that.
My bad. going through RPG withdrawal, I'm starting to get the shakes and stuff. It's not good. It's not good.
My dice tower is getting dusty.
My bad. No, there's I like the looking for something bright. I think there's the best stories have a gradient on either side. You're gonna have that the bright colors and the darker tones, and that's really where that juxtaposition is how you're gonna, I think, get something really meaningful. But sometimes games should be fun. Just having fun with RPGs. What is it? Dungeons and Discords episode of My Little Pony is basically... Everyone get that reference? The Dungeons and Discord episode is really just... That is engagement, the episode. Because Discord, this villainous character, doesn't want to play the RPG, Spike's RPG. And
because he thinks it's for nerds.
Right. That's really what's going on. Is, how do you... It's for nerds. Well, no, this is a lot of fun. And luckily, pop culture has helped us out a little bit by disarming some skepticism about what an RPG can be and how much fun people can have. So we kind of landed on two of my other sort of bullet points here, not that I use notes. But Session 0, you brought up... you actually brought up, Charlotte, the Session 0. Session 0 is... I mean, can you think of a terribly compelling reason not to have a Session 0? Can anyone in the world think of a terribly compelling reason not to have a Session 0 anymore? I feel like there was...
No.
No.
I actually wrote a note, I've been writing down things to comment on so that I don't interrupt anybody, but also so I don't forget. If you listen to we actually have a BXP episode about running Session 0, and my co-host recommends doing something she calls the pilot episode, where you run one session of the game with everybody's characters and it's a freebie. You don't like the way your character was built, redo her. You don't like the way you jive with the other player characters, redo it. You don't like your choices of powers or your feats or whatever, redo it. You don't like your stats, redo it. Like, you get one freebie, and then we start play.
I love that.
I love that idea. Like,
love that.
It's a pilot episode, so your character can be recast. The actor quit and someone else came back. Like,
Yeah.
it's a test run. I mean, I think there's maybe an argument against doing that because people have limited time. But if you can do that, I think that's a wonderful idea.
No, I've always had the amorphous gray blob rule, which is the first 3 sessions you're all amorphous gray blobs, so that we can change them if something's not working. So you have 3. We usually do like a 3 adventure, but I like the pilot episode a lot better because that feels less arbitrary than my like amorphous gray blob rule.
I mean, I also always roll with the rule, I guess, that like if you don't like something about your character, it's fine if you change it. It's bullshit to be like, well, this is a decision you made months ago. Live with it. Like if there's a power or something that you're not using, I'm fine with you changing it because why invest in something that you're not doing? You know?
There's a BXP quote that y'all often say. It's something, and it's right on the tip of my tongue. If you don't it's something about changing things.
Change it if you want to.
There you go. I think that's just freestyling with the rules give you a great starting point, but even Gary Gygax has the the goal. Gary Gygax's role, golden rule is that like the rules should be malleable because the story and the fun are what matter. Like those are sacrosanct in the game. Other than that, nothing else is. Any thoughts there, Charlotte? As I catch back up with Jack Gang here on the you started the session 0 thing, and this was something I wanted to discuss. I think it's super important.
Well, I don't know. I was just keeping the conversation going a little bit in the chat there, where AOS coach was saying that there's unlikely to be a murder hobo in session 0. I'm sure if you talk to the right people, you'd be surprised.
One of the first campaigns.
Never underestimate the tenacity of a murder hobo.
There can be a lot of fun with a murder hobo campaign if during your session 0 you establish it's just five people who want to be murder hobos. And then you do a monster of you like me, my lofty GM notes go out the window. I rewrite it as a Monster of the Week campaign that waves to my story going on beside the town that they're routing and stuff like that. You can have a lot of fun, but that's the importance of the session 0. Get everyone on the same page.
Okay. This might be my inner snobbery coming out. If you want to be a murder hobo, play a video game.
Ooh.
I'm applauding you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Hot take.
I'm also a snob, so.
Someone who works in the industry, a snob about RPGs, please tell me more. No.
I have some pretty in-depth thoughts about why people murder hobo and stuff like that too. Which I have flagged on my notes as trust. So like, I think you can wean people off of the idea of being a murder hobo by engagement and trust, because people want to just go from place to place, killing and looting, because they do not trust the GM to give them something to engage with meaningfully. Like a lot of people, the murder hobo thing is often a very reactionary response to an antagonistic GM who will like kill your horse if you leave it parked outside the dungeon, or like murders your parents if whatever, like kills off people that matter to the player's characters and all that kind of stuff.
No RPG character ever has living parents.
Unless they're a plot point. I've done that a few times.
So am I.
Tess had parents, yeah.
Right, but like, I was just making parents as a joke, but like, let's say your character's sister is someone who's valuable to her, and then your GM kills her off while you're, adventuring. Well, you're never going to trust the GM to treat the things you care about with meaning. Like, killing, like, sometimes killing off an NPC that's valuable to you is cool and dramatic, but the player should be in on that, or suggest it, or something like that. And when you do things like that, you violate your player's trust, and you make them act in a reactionary way towards you. And
Andrew.
I stole your shadow. I'm sorry.
This is not to say that you can't. This is not to say that you can't fuck with your players, because you absolutely should. And as a good GM, you should constantly just be throwing them enough rope for them to hang themselves with. Constantly.
Yep.
Like, conflict is excellent, but violating trust is not. So, like, when you do that, you basically tell them implicitly, I don't care about you or the things that matter to you. And so they go, well, we don't care either. And they just go around killing people and not giving a fuck. So, like, I think building a trusting relationship between yourself and your players and going, okay, then, because once that's established, you can then go, okay, get into this mess, because you know I'm not gonna fuck you in any way you don't want to while you try to get out of it.
Consent is important.
Consent is important.
Right.
And I mean fuck you in the, like, plot fuckery kind of way.
I just felt like
You know, if you want to include sexual content at your table, that's up to you, but
Well,
it should always be consensual.
It should be consensual, and this is another thing you can establish with a session 0. This is where the theme checklist. I mean, as that session 0, when you get the party dynamic, which is something that Charlotte brought up, I thought was really cool. Is why are you going to be a group? Having that in mind, a lot of the you all meet in a bar sort of thing. There can be some fun there, but like being like, y'all already met in a bar. You're adventuring now. Why are you adventuring now? Starting with that. I mean, that's even from screenwriting and script writing and novel writing. Start the scene as late as possible. Get in late, get out early. I mean, you're doing that good storytelling tenet with the actual party dynamic. You're going, why are you together? And we're just going to start with that. I think that's really cool. That builds the trust. Everyone is on the same page with what they want. Maybe someone wants a political intrigue style game, and you're like, yeah, sorry, this is the you fight robot mountains campaign. Oops, I made my political intrigue character. You want to be upfront with some of that. I don't think any GM is such a clever storyteller that like you have to hold all the cards to the vest, and you won't be able to tell a compelling story without like being like, hey, this is going to be the one where a god wakes up. That's what the campaign's about, and it's gonna be a big deal when that god wakes up, and we're gonna go in some crazy epic level type stuff, or however you want to pitch it, right? Being upfront with that from the storyteller, the GM side of it, helping your players all kind of engage and connect early. That's building trust. And just kind of the other side of the coin, I think, to your point, Monica, some players, if they don't trust you and think you're just going to kill their support character, or the things that matter to them, they never form bonds that they care about either in the game. They're just not going to, if you're just going to like run everything, they're going to only have that surface level enjoyment, and you want to build something deeper.
I mean, I think there's also value in just playing a dungeon crawl if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like someone in the chat suggested play Space Marines kicking alien ass. I'm down for that. That's that game. Like, a dungeon crawl is that game. Space Marines just destroying the Xenos is that game. Like, that's not really murder hoboing. That's playing that game that you've established. And those are both games I would play.
Steam library.
What's up? Sorry.
He said Torchlight, and now I need to check something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Torchlight. I think it's called Torchlight. Is oh man,
Yeah,
what's
it's a Diablo-like.
No. I'm forgetting the name of it. Andrew, if Andrew Yells were here, he'd Lightbringer, Torchbringer. It's an RPG. It's pure dungeon crawl. Torchbearer. Yeah, pure dungeon crawl RPG. You have like a light source mechanic that like it's just like if you really want the brass tacks of just a pure mechanical dungeon crawl, like there's a game for you. There's nothing wrong with that. So I was
even playing like a classic D&D game as a dungeon crawl is fine. Like, I think that's also, well, let's tie that right back into session 0, because if you're setting up session 0, you're getting everyone at the table, you're going to roll up characters, and you're going to tell people this is a dungeon crawl. Right? Like, so the expectation, setting expectations is another thing we talk about on BXP a lot. So, like, the expectation is set that this is going to be a game about killing monsters and getting loot, period. And that's fine. Like, I'm not ragging on that as a game style. That may not be something that other people enjoy, or a game that you want to buy into. So if you show up at the session 0 and the DM is like, this is going to be a dungeon crawl, we're going to kill monsters and get loot, and you're kind of like, I'm not into that. Maybe I won't play this time. Then you are informed and you can back out instead of building like a political intrigue character and then realizing that there's going to be no politics in this game.
Dastin Brandt, my kingmaker through politics character that will never be. Yeah. My chair just broke. Oh no, it's horrible.
Are
yeah.
you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You're okay.
Okay.
Oh man, that sucks. Rip. See, I couldn't help but kill the companion character. The evil GM just that will is going to do what it must, and in this case, the chair had to die.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I know.
Not that bad. I like to joke that I'm an evil GM, but I'm actually like I think I'm a pretty okay.
You're fairly benevolent.
Okay.
But
Right. No. We got to ABB. ABB. Always be on brand.
Shadow.
I'm evil. No. What was it? The Stolen Shadow? Yeah. That was like
Stolen
4.
Shadow.
Yeah.
I'll hold that one against me forever.
I know. I stole her assassin's shadow. It was
like some Peter Pan shit? Or
yeah,
like
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In Final Fantasy,
Very dark Peter Pan.
in Final Fantasy Tactics, there's an ability called Shadow Stitch, and they were fighting this not fighting. There was this character who's essentially this. If you ever saw Reboot, Hexadecimal, if you could imagine Hexadecimal, the like spider goddess who could like stitch shadows and like craft and stuff like that. She dealt a lot with like shadow magic and stuff like that. She stole Tessa's shadow. It was a paralysis effect temporarily, but Tess, a character of just supreme will, was able to like break it eventually, and she never got her shadow back, but she did gain bonuses to stealth because her shadow couldn't give her away.
I mean, you're ribbing him, but it actually sounds like something that was pretty, but that was pretty memorable. So I wouldn't exactly call that betraying trust.
No, but I am going to give him a hard time about it for the rest of ever.
Yeah,
I mean, that's legit.
I
That's
deserve
fine.
it. I do deserve it. I do deserve it. Or it's like I had a bad habit of like killing mounts, but not on purpose. So we're talking about this trust thing, and I think like, GMs make mistakes. I think that's this is something that GMs need to own. By the way, sincerity can go a long way when you're trying to maintain trust at your table. But it would be stuff like they tie up the mount outside the cave. They'd go inside, get teleported somewhere, and I'm just like, crap, I did it again. So like people just quit playing stuff with mounts in my games because I would just like neglect their mounts in any of my calculations for encounters or stories and stuff. So there was a breach of trust there with mounts, I think, for a lot of my games for a long time.
Yeah, like you've probably heard of lines and veils. And that idea. Do you think I should explain it for chat gang?
Chat gang may not know. They tend to tune in for AOS content.
Sure. I'll explain it to chat gang because it's pretty simple. It's not as weird or dry as explaining publishing in prints. So a line and a veil are basically things that you step forward usually during your session 0 of things that are either going to not appear at all in this game or are going to be like behind the curtain. They exist, but we're not going to ever show them directly. So putting out a good example, sexual assault is usually a line. Like people don't want that to be in their game. I will often put out harm to children. That really upsets me. I don't want kids getting murdered or hurt in my RPGs. That's a line for me. Nope. Let's say if someone's really arachnophobic. No spiders in this game, please. You can put that down as a line. And so, like, even if you were planning on using giant spiders, well, they're giant praying mantises now. Too bad. Like, you have to respect people's
Yeah.
phobias. They're like, nope, that's a line for me. I have a colleague and a friend who's utterly fucking terrified of centipedes. That's a line, no centipedes. Like, no matter how
can
creepy you
sympathize.
want your dungeon critters to be, no centipedes. And one of the things that often comes up when I do this with my group is no harm to pet animals or mount animals. So, like, doing a line in Veil and being like, nope, I don't want my horse to ever get hurt. Like, it's plot immune. And saying that up front is good so that you don't accidentally violate trust because you don't really think the horse getting hurt is a big deal, but someone who really cares about that animal does.
You don't want to Atreyu anybody. Like,
Right. And some people really care about that, and you want to give them a chance to say that. Veils are things like, I'm always okay with characters getting busy. I just don't want it on screen.
we fade to black on
Yeah, you
my
fade to
campaign.
black. Right,
Yeah.
right. Like, romance and sexual relationships can totally happen in my games. I'm not against that. Like, in fact, I think players and NPCs, like, developing romantic or sexual feelings towards each other makes for a more interesting story. But, like, I ain't here to write porn with you guys, so that's...
Expecting a character... Sorry.
No.
That expecting a character to remain completely, for lack of a better word, chaste throughout the course of any campaign, I think is a little unrealistic.
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be explicit, it doesn't have to be on screen. And in fact, sometimes it's funnier if you don't.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've had the brown chicken, brown cow rule, or brown chicken, brown cow, or the fade to black.
God.
So like that's where we make the fun, the funny, the humor comes in. Like, yeah, the brown chicken, brown cow happens. Like, and you move on, because that's part of that's building that relationship. One thing I love about RPGs is the rolling jokes, the inside jokes that just carry from campaign to campaign and game to game, and they start out as a joke with this one group over here, and if you cross-pollinate other games, you find yourself making that same joke in another troop or another game. That stuff's fantastic. I love this idea. Vanilla, referring to the lines and veils. I think this is another really kind of just important thing. This goes with the theme sheet notion that I think White Wolf is starting to again, like, really galvanize in their rules, and not just like a player driven thing on the internet. It's actually no, this is on the we're going to tell you what themes and tropes to avoid in this game. It's going to be right as a stat on your character sheet. Part of your session 0, you should just discuss these things. You should never take for granted, like, people's assumptions and stuff. I tend to be pretty good with my horror descriptions. I would hate to, like, land on someone's very real phobia because I've never, no fly zones or centipedes. Oh, man, because I had this really wicked time eater centipede encounter. Now I can't do that, or I do that and I discover this thing that have just never come up in natural conversations with even your friends.
Right, because I actually want to go back to one of the games that we've played, because the Thin Ones.
Yeah.
Like, I did not realize that was going to figure in my nightmares. I went to bed that night, and yeah, but
the Thin Ones were for chat gang and the other guests here. The Thin Ones were a campaign focus villain that really they were in the first act. The party didn't know about them, and then the second act is really where, like, they really came to fruition, and then they were sort of dealt with via this hexadecimal character. She was actually weaving the Thin Ones out of shadow stuffs. The Thin Ones were essentially basically these abyssal stick figure drawings with these hook hands, and they would physically possess by, like, crawling inside bodies and unfurling across your physical skeleton. Very much like a sort of puppeteer type, creepy. Yeah, see, based very heavily on my own night terrors, where essentially I have sleep paralysis. I see a bunch of black shadowy stuff in the room, and I'm like, oh, dude, those make sick villains. Of course, I myself never thought to even, no one's going to be creeped out by, like, weird shadow puppet strings. Like, no one's going to care about that. And then you go into the description, you watch the party kind of recoil a little bit. You go, I need to tone down this. reading the room, right? Like you.
It's not so much the monster as it is the loss of agency
Right.
that really bothered me.
Yeah.
But that's not something that you really think about when it comes to as Monica said, lines and veils, which I think is a fantastic concept, and I will.
Well, the thin ones never. There was the one time they were always supposed to appear as a threat to the party, but never really threatened the party. It was supposed to be these are, tagging the NPCs and all these like sort of, you look at an anime, you have the characters in the background that are just like the hand painted watercolor, and they're never animated. Like those are a threat to those. They're not a threat to the party. But then the game happens and things happen over the course of like organic play, and now suddenly the party is directly encountering these things, and player agency is one of those it's very important that your characters always maintain agency and control of their characters. I mean, these are their avatars in your world, or your being everyone's world, right? Like, because we're sharing this experience. Player agency is a delicate balance. You want to have cool mind control effects or something like that. So one of the things I did as a GM early is like I left dominate abilities. I just don't use them. I switched towards like confusion effects instead. So like, yeah, you still lose agency, but it's confusion. It's more the My Little Pony than grotesque and overt and full domination of one's agency. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am a person who writes powers a lot.
Yes.
And so like, sometimes things like, how do you write mind control and have it be cool and scary?
Yes.
And something that creates a sense of horror in the player without getting gross and creepy, right?
Right.
Like, you don't want to give a creep the tools to assault or harm their player by taking control of them, right?
Yes.
Like by taking control of their character. That's exactly the opposite of what you want to do with a scary power. So a lot of the times when I'm creating these, I will do something like basically create a list of choices that you can force someone to choose. So like,
ooh, I like that.
You take control of someone and they must do one of these things. So if it's used on a player, they still only must do one of these things. Like, you can make a demand of a character who, must, take an action they are capable of taking, that is within these things, involving this ability or involving this skill or whatever. Like, so if that's used on you, you're like, okay, I have to take a combat action, but it's up to me, the player, to decide who I take it against. Or, there's also nothing wrong with being like, but you have to take it against your friend, because that can create good drama. But if you leave it open-ended, then you leave someone room to be like, well, then you have to have sex with my NPC, and that's disgusting.
We don't
want to enable that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another kind of in the same vein. I'm sorry, I'm talking over you. Continue. Or
No. That was basically the whole thought. Is that I also write. I do a ton of powers design for Scion, which does involve things, and also like Exalted is a high powered, like they're literally demigods. They're the children of the gods game, so a lot of things that I put like hard code into things is that you cannot use this on another player's character without their consent. Out of character. Period.
Yeah.
Because I wrote a bunch of stuff for the Trickster calling, which lets you like automatically steal shit and like pilfer things from people and stuff like that. Things that are really annoying when they're used against another player character without their consent. And so all of them are basically tagged like, oh, you can totally use this to fuck with your party if the other person is in on it. Like their character doesn't have to be okay with it, but the player does.
Right. Well, and I think there's something iconic with when you're talking about like playing roles and stuff like that. The Jedi mind trick, right? Like, who has it like pantomimed, like being a Jedi and stuff like that? But you want to keep that fun, the surface level. You don't ever want to like open up those cringe moments. The greatest mistake I ever made as a GM was having this weird televangelist encounter, and that's where I learned the hard lesson of how much of a third rail mind control is in games. Because you want that, like, there's a natural drama that occurs when, like, this guy could mind control the barbarian. Oh no! If the barbarian swings the axe at the party, this is, there's a tension there. So you want to balance that tension, but then you also again, that third rail of total loss of agency of your character. I mean, the other part of it is they're not playing the game anymore. If I'm controlling your character, you're not playing the game. You're supposed to be playing, not me. I could play all 5 characters myself, but then I'd just be really sad and lonely. Monica writes dope powers. And something like a trickster mage or a Loki-esque. I can see people wanting to play something like that, but not wanting, yeah. So
you don't want that kind of stuff to become disruptive.
Right.
I feel like I've talked an awful lot.
That's funny because I felt like that too.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I guess we're all in this together then.
Yeah. Anything to add in there, Charlotte? Because we've all been talking an awful lot.
When I get going, I feel like I talk an awful lot. But yeah.
Hooray! Self-conscious.
Well, as a community manager, I have to talk a lot. Get those conversations going.
Right.
When it comes to what was it, lines and veils? I don't think I've heard it termed as that before. Honestly, not too long ago, when the discussion around an X card came up, there was a lot of people who were like, what the fuck and why? But it was very quick that it started to get adopted at tables everywhere and conventions everywhere, and all of a sudden it is now a thing which is there, which is in place, which people use, and nobody questions it.
The X card being this themed checklist. You go through and you cross off the stuff you don't want to play. You don't.
No.
No.
That would be your consent checklist.
Okay.
Your X card is as you're going through a game, and if you come across something that you're not okay with, then you would pull your X card or a red card or a yellow card, depending on what the table's system is set at. And when that card comes into play, it's, okay, let's quickly take a moment, we'll shift gears and move on to a different topic. It lets people avoid those triggering situations that they might not even know that they're getting into. I think Monica wants to say something.
Oh, no.
I hadn't heard of this personally.
Basically 2 things about the X card, because it's really good, and I was astounded in a good way to see it showing up at D&D Adventure League tables. But the X card kind of has a little bit of a problem. It's a good tool. Don't get me wrong. But the trouble with the X card is that you basically flag something that's wrong, right? But it's already happened. And so, it is unfortunately a tool for you to go, whoa, stop, I want to back out of this. Which is fine. That's a good way to tell the GM that, this is a problem. We'll use the thin ones example. Katie could have thrown down an X card and been like, that's too much for me, that's too creepy, oof.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the problem is that image, or whatever the troublesome thing is already there.
Yeah.
The other thing is that people often forget that the original X card also had another side with an O on it, where you flip it over and throw it down when things were good.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to see that become more popular, too.
You want the good side?
That's all I had to add.
Right on.
I know one system that people use. Actually, sorry, Katie, you were going to say something as well?
I have completely lost whatever thought that was. It is gone. Carry on.
A partner system to the X card is your green light system. You have a green card, you have a yellow card, and you have a red card. A green card is all systems go, this is fun, this is awesome. Yellow card is something where, okay, you know what, I'm not too sure about how this is playing out. And this might be getting to be my little no area. And then the red card would come out when, yep, that's definitely a no area. Let's not go there. Let's kind of take a moment if people need it.
I like to call it the cringe zone.
Yeah.
We are entering the cringe zone where you're
Well, no, I don't even know if I would call it that, because that's, what Monica was saying, indicates that it's bad. And it's not necessarily bad. It's just outside of your realm of comfort. Like spiders.
Right.
the use of the use of X cards shouldn't be a negative thing, and it shouldn't be what people use when things go overboard. Gaming in public spaces and being a decent fucking human being should prevent you from going into those dark areas.
Yeah.
There were situations that arose last year which shouldn't have happened, and they made national headlines at a convention. A lot of us know what it is. I'm not going to go into those details. The groups that I play with online, we play for our own enjoyment, and we play for people's enjoyment as well. That is why we do the podcasts, and that is why we do some of the actual plays that we do, is not only for us but for other people. So we try and keep things almost PG. We will always, in our zero session, talk about our no-goes. Like what was mentioned before, sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual violence is a definite no-go. Violence against children is a definite no-go. And then at that point, we as a table will say, yes, these are definite no's. And then we'll go around and we will talk about what we expect and what we won't want to deal with in the game itself, which can be hard for some people. But the people that I'm playing with, we're now playing with each other for months on end, so it's a little bit easier to talk about these things. One of the podcasts that we've recently done, we have to record our last episode still, is Cult Divinity Lost. And when you look at some of the conversations surrounding Cult, it could be a really triggering game, and depending on who you're playing with and depending on what you're used to, it could be a very cringy game. A lot of people have the opinion that, well, if you're not a big fan of horror and violence and this and that, why are you playing this game? But
like Vampire, right? Like Vampire would be a really easy target for, like, why are you playing Vampire if you're not a fan of blood? It's like,
yes,
I've run into that too. Is you know, I want to run a Vampire game for, like, because I love the politic and the intrigue and the clans and some of that stuff. And it's like, I don't want to obsess over the blood and the feeding aspect of it, but like, a lot of the podcasts that I kind of listen to get caught up on Vampire are like, that's why you're playing a vampire game. If you don't like blood, then you're playing it wrong. And I'm like, I don't want to obsess over the blood thing. I'm sorry. It's an allegory that I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that you mentioned the vampire thing. One of our viewers right now, I hope it's viewers because my Twitch errored out. We are in the Lore by Night Discord together, and last week I went on a little bit of a rant about like some of the themes around Vampire the Masquerade. Like I want to run the starter set on my stream eventually. I plan on doing that a little bit sooner rather than later. But to do that, I went and I created a character to see character creation from the start to the finish to get a feel for that, and I found character creation on my tablet, because I don't have the book yet, was hard. There was a lot of back and forth. But as I was going through some of the aspects, in specific the predator type, the siren was problematic for me, just by the way of the wording of what the siren is. I don't have it on me right now, but it almost... Actually, Monica might be able to help clarify. It almost specifically states that the siren will feed during
Intercourse.
Intercourse or anything like that.
Yeah.
And
Are we talking about the V5 predator types?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're uncomfortable.
That one was. Like, I would never have my character go and do that, but I wanted that predator type.
Right.
You know what?
I don't know if the brown chicken, brown cow can help that predator that much, though.
Yeah, so I have a couple notes here, and the one, I think if you want a vampire game that is less focused on the aspect of feeding and being a blood-sucking monster, then I think Vampire the Requiem may actually be more for you. VTR is a little bit more about, like, the metaphysical state of being a monster, as opposed to V5, which is really focused on like Hunger Dice are a fucking phenomenal mechanic, but they make you be a blood-sucking monster. Like, the game makes you be a monster. And like I read through the predator types, and they're all really cool, but they are all really kind of upsetting, and I think that's intentional. Which segues really nicely into let's talk about some other safety tools to help. I want to introduce you to some other safety tools because there's actually quite a lot of them.
Right.
And you can go listen to the bonus experience episode about it too, and where we go into all of them in detail. But one of the things I think you may find really helpful, especially since you're a big fan of horror and horror games, is the check-in, where when things are about to get intense, or you've read the room and gotten the sense that maybe like people are getting uncomfortable, you stop and you check in. And you're like, how's everybody doing? And then they go, okay, I'm doing all right. Or like, stop, I'm not doing okay. Or like, there's like a middle, I'm iffy. And there's like there's a couple of gestures. You can, if you Google it, you can find it. There's a printout that's like, these are the hand gestures you make. That's like, I'm doing good. I want to stop. And then like, I'm so. And everybody's like, and then the one person who's like, I don't know, this is making me uncomfortable. Then you can either have a conversation with them or like ask them how they're feeling, and then either back off or take a break and come back to it when people feel better.
Right.
Or feel more ready to handle this, or can articulate, what's bothering them. Also, as Violet pointed out in the chat, this does require that like you can overcome the social pressure to, clarify why you feel the way you feel, and that can be hard, especially if you're playing with people you're not as familiar with.
Or you're
right.
She's totally right. What's up, Katie?
It's not always easy to articulate why you're upset, because God knows that sometimes if I'm just suddenly I'm faced with something that I find squicky or gross or disturbing, if you talk to me in the moment, I'm not always sure how to say what I find objectionable about. Shit, I have been drinking. But if you give me some time to chew it over, just let me step back for a few minutes, it's going to be easier for me to explain exactly why I find the thin ones, again, going to that example, because yes, it's easier for me to articulate why I find something so disturbing. Sometimes I just have to unpack my own feelings.
Yeah, I found the one of the big things is someone, I writing horror fiction and telling a horror game are two entirely different things. One thing, the way I've often described it to myself is the difference between Resident Evil, which is action horror, and Silent Hill, which is survival horror. Sort of shifting something more towards the action horror thing can make a lot of things more palatable. This is the sort of like the Grand Theft Auto effect. Like, I would certainly never get in my car just like start plowing through pedestrians, but like that video game sort of dilutes things behind all these walls of like, I don't know, that's a terrible example. I like the Resident Evil Silent Hill thing better, where Silent Hill is a very personal, dark, internal conflict, a lot of visuals, a lot of what it focuses on is a lot different, whereas Resident Evil's like, oh, here's the guns and zombies are practically just, it's zombies. Like, ooh, they're so muted compared to something like Pyramid Head, which is a very visual and even content-wise where that thing is coming from versus like, T-virus. It's just a virus. Like, there's not even a hell or a heaven or hell vibe to the zombies in Resident Evil, where you could, prey on somebody's like religion with your theme, and you're not even realizing it because you've just glossed over that. That doesn't resonate with you as something fearful or stressful. So I've found that that's one way I've kind of begun to realize, articulate, or think about it in terms of RPGs. But I don't know if that helps. I mean, the big thing is I've just shifted towards kind of back what Charlotte was saying with like the PG vibe. Like, it's really just become like a lot of like higher adventure themes and just kind of diluting out a lot of that stuff. Like, yeah, there's a big creepy spider, but I don't linger on the description of the big creepy spider anymore.
Yeah, I think I was kind of getting to the point where having something explicitly stated, I think, takes away from what could possibly be the intent around the creation of it. When you say something explicitly sex, your mind goes to a certain place. But if you change that word out for an intimate moment, that could mean a whole different world of things.
And like how you present something matters, right? Like it's not just being on. Yeah, like Vanille here is. I don't like horror, but my group got me into Call of Cthulhu by making it into campy B movie horror. I mean that's where a lot of my one shots have went. Is they're really over the top, like Breakfast Club versus zombie style like silliness.
When we were going through our zero session for our cult game, we were clear as to what we were doing, or what we were willing to do going forward. And we actually have our zero session up on podcast with Mud and Blood, if anyone wants to check that out to see what we went through, as well as our first 2 episodes, which are kind of like prequel episodes for our characters before our game gets some screen time here in the next month or 2. One of the things that I put down there because of a previous experience was having a stalker. That was a bit of a rough period a few years back, and not one that I would like to go through again. So that was pretty much a no situation for me. But through my character creation and through conversations that we had behind the scenes, it ended up kind of coming up in the game itself. And even though it was a bit of a no situation in our zero session, it was something that was slowly brought in and communicated whether we wanted to go down that route. And when it came time for my character to face some of that stuff, it was a road that we went down, which ended up being a little less uncomfortable for me to deal with than what I potentially thought. So even though you have your lines and your veils laid out in session 0, if things go in a direction and you are thinking about it and you are comfortable going down that route, there's nothing saying you can't go down there for the progression of your character and the player yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Player as yourself, the player yourself.
I understand what's going on, and I understand the point that you're making, but I would like to add that when you draw your lines and when you're trying to create, a suspenseful or horror-filled experience for your players.
Well, I mean, it doesn't always have to be horror.
There's
right?
power in the unknown. And this is something that I tend to use a lot in my own humor, where if you just drop a couple of details and let everyone else fill in the rest, what they can imagine is often way funnier than anything I could come up with on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually a trope. It's called the noodle incident. And besides applying to humor, I think that it can be really effective in horror settings as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that like this is pertinent to like not just horror though? Like horror is like a really easy thing to characterize and discuss, but like standard adventure and fantasy, like I think Spiders was like a really interesting one earlier, where like being deeply affected by these things that aren't necessarily horror exclusive. When you can do a horror game, there's probably a lot more, and this isn't the like, why are you playing vampire if you don't like blood thing. This is, if you get into horror, like, you go, okay, there's going to be some no-fly zones here. How do you deal with that when it's, you're just trying to play your Kingmaker, high fantasy space pirates adventure game? Like, how do you, those moments I don't think feels as telegraphed. The sort of no-fly zones don't feel to me like as telegraphed. How do you address that in a session 0?
Sometimes I just toss out my general lines as a matter of course. And then, like, sometimes I have to ask extra questions, too, of what, like, the setting's about, if I don't already know. So, like, I have a big, like, I want to retain bodily autonomy rule. So like I don't want to be shapeshifted against my will. I don't want to have my character's physical size changed unless it's me controlling it. Like I get to Ant-Man me, you don't. You know, like don't polymorph me into a rat or anything like that. I'm not into it. I don't do anything to my character's body that I don't want you to do. Which like maybe applies to a D&D game.
Yeah, polymorph,
or an
right?
exotic game, but it's not going to apply to a modern Trinity Continuum game, which is a modern action adventure game. And so like an Ocean's 11 or a Leverage or a Burn Notice type game played with Trinity Continuum, I might still throw things out like no harm to kids, no harm to pet animals, and no sexual assault. The things that are a matter of course, and whenever you put them out there, people are like, "Oh yeah, of course, duh." And I'm like, "Well, I'm just putting it out there, just to get in the comfort of saying these things and making them clear." Like giant spiders probably not going to be a problem in my Leverage game. You know, you never know, but like it doesn't hurt to put out there that like, "Hey, I'm arachnophobic. Nobody should have a pet tarantula," like, or whatever. You know, it doesn't hurt to put that out there as like maybe something you could encounter. But I probably don't need to put the whole like, don't don't polymorph my character against my will in a game where magic doesn't exist.
Right.
I also someone said they liked campy B movies and so they play Call of Cthulhu like that. Stop twisting that system that way. Go play The Came from Beneath the Sea. That is specifically a game for doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
if you like that, there's a game for you. Go play it.
Yeah, and Call of Cthulhu is on the D20 base system, right? The open.
Call of Cthulhu's percentile
D100.
base.
Oh, they moved it off. Oh, okay, I haven't seen shows how long.
There probably was a D20 version because in the early aughts there was a D20 version of literally everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the Call of Cthulhu I was familiar with, and I despised Sanity. I hated having a Doom tracker that said I'm going to lose the game at this many time intervals, and that punished me for noticing things. Because as we've established with the Malkavian, is I love noticing things in games. Can you type that name out? Vanilla asks.
Doing it right now.
How do you? Yeah, I think that's. I mean, this just keeps, for me, like, stressing. Maybe I'm just going to retitle this episode, like, Session 0 is important, like, RantCast. Because a lot of these, like, issues that I think can come up over the course of a campaign really can be addressed at your Session 0. Set your moving off of, like, necessarily, like, the no-fly zones or the lines and veils, but, like, just establishing expectations is a big deal when you want to have fun in something. Can you expect to play pirates in this game? Like, do you want to play pirates? Like, can you expect to like have the king maker or the dungeon crawler? Like, all expectations go a long way when it comes to things. Mephisto notices you.
That is the new name of the stream.
Yeah.
I also want to throw out there, because we talked about horror a whole lot, and then we brought up comedy and the subversion of expectations. And basically, horror and comedy are the same thing, with tension released differently.
Yes.
Please see how incredible Jordan Peele is at doing horror, and also how fucking funny he is.
Well, he just...
Yeah.
Right, because they're two sides of the same coin. And in fact, there's a BXP episode about this, too. Just go listen to my podcast.
Yeah, actually, real quick, just turn this off. I'll wait. Go ahead and turn off RantCast. Yeah, go catch up on all the BXP, and then you can join the conversation more informed.
What more do you want?
For you to subscribe to my Patreon, that's what more I want.
All right.
Wait, what is it? Bing. Like, you gotta do the...
Bing.
Yeah, Bing.
That's what we say when we're, like, part of the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yeah, Bing. That's what it... Yeah. I thought it was just any time you were self-promotional. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
No, yeah, comedy... No, this is a fantastic point, except I suck at comedy. I'm not funny. But, I'm pretty good at, like, making people afraid. But maybe it's just because like, God, it's so true though. Like it's subverting expectations. Like, I just had another eureka moment. I'm gonna listen to your podcast more too. I think.
Okay.
It's gonna make me smarter. There's a lot of microaggressions that I've run into. As a black player, there's a lot of microaggressions that I've run into that were seemingly innocuous phrases or genre concepts that are charged, and this can matter a lot for streamed games where your audience is anyone that wants to watch. I think like we're approaching like a more woke culture, and it's really important for like me, a boring white male, to realize that I'm not often the offended party, and that I do not have the final say personally in like whether you can be offended or not, but rather to always be aware. I've stopped using the phrase that I to call a spade a spade. Now I know it shares it's Greek, right? Whatever. I don't need to be beat over the head by etymology, but because there is a perception at all that it has like racial connotations, I've just stopped using it because I've become aware of it. And I think that's something that's just super important. When it comes to the approachability of making content. I don't know what really, there wasn't a question in there, but I thought it was pertinent to point out that. Yeah.
I think the most important takeaway there is that if that's not your area of expertise, like if that's not your lived experience, then when someone tells you, hey, this is the thing that is the problem, to not get defensive.
Yeah.
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 Do your best to listen and take whatever it is into account.
Yeah. I'm still personally struggling with not saying you guys at my tables, as it like, oh, you guys walking in there, and like, damn it. And I think intent to be better and follow through on the intent to be better it goes a long way, because not everyone's
follow through is the most important part.
Right. Yes, it's super important to change it. And Katie checks me constantly, so like, thank you, Katie. I'm kidding.
Wait, I do?
No, I think it's important to follow through.
Because I will if you want me to.
Please do. I encourage anyone to tell me I need to be better, because I strive for it. Sorry, it was the second part of something I had. I set up thread. Some kinds of microaggressions which can happen, even in innocuous games too. Yeah, I mean, I see like language is where I see it a lot, in like how we say things is just shifting off of like these common colloquialisms and to a better parlance, because language evolves. Our understanding of games, what was awesome for VTM in the 90s, some of that stuff doesn't translate very well right now. You're actually with Exalted, talking about, that sort of othering that was happening in Exalted earlier on, even though it had like a lot of these more progressive concepts. Well, hey, we need to be aware of this other stuff too, and that follow through, that change is really important.
And I think while you're following through, it's important to forgive yourself for slipping occasionally, because progress isn't a straight line, and that's something that I find I have to remind myself of that every so often, because as woke as I try to be, and for as much as I know I just like throw things into conversation with you and the rest of our crew, but
there's a familiarity there too, I think, that helps but then when you translate that to, now we have an audience, that rapport is not there, that trust, that people want to be better necessarily when you just have some guy talking on the internet or what have you. Sorry to jump in there, but
totally cool.
I think when it comes to something like a microaggression that you may not be aware of because you are a white person and have never experienced it, but three of us are women, so we certainly kind of know what that is like, at least an adjacent thing. Maybe not the black experience specifically, but the experience of a microaggression. Like, you only get to be ignorant about that once. Like, if it's not your lived experience, obviously you wouldn't know. But when someone is like, these are things that are the problem, you have to learn from that and do better. And the do better part is the most important part, because you only get to be like, well, I didn't know once. Because once you've been informed, that shit doesn't fly anymore. And unfortunately, like, our whole culture is based on things that are awful. Sorry, go ahead, Charlotte.
No. Continue your thought.
Oh, I was
Yeah,
just
I
going to
wanna
say
know where
that,
that
like,
one's going.
unfortunately, white supremacy and patriarchy and all that stuff underpins a lot of the things that make up our daily lives and conversation. And so escaping that is really hard. And sometimes you'll probably say things that you were unaware is hurtful to someone.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, Charlotte, tagging you in. Go.
Yeah, so to carry on with that, like when it comes to the microaggressions and a lot of phrases along that line, I'm pretty naive when it comes to the big wide world out there. Part of that is because I'm Canadian and we are sheltered. We live in a frozen wasteland. We don't see anybody or interact with anybody for half the year. But like when it comes to the issues that people of color have to deal with, I have no idea. And some of those phrases, like even calling a spade, I don't know what the connotation of that is, which I'm going to be looking up afterwards, so we don't have to discuss it here. But I didn't know anything like that. I honestly thought it was related to playing cards. That's my ignorance on some of that stuff. But
Yeah, it's a garden tool.
Garden tool, actually. No, it's a Greek idiom, but like it's because we do live in a world where there's assholes carrying tiki torches, very much trying to be racist and getting away with it. Anything that could be perceived as racist, like if I go to a movie theater to watch, like, I don't know, like Frozen or something, and it's just all Nazis there, I'm gonna check myself. Like, I didn't know that Frozen was a Nazi propaganda film, but now I might need to, like, look into this. And if that perception shifts, I guess I don't like that movie
You
anymore.
want to know if you just pulled that out of your ass?
I just said Frozen arbitrarily. I'm sorry. For recognition.
Yep.
No.
an easy... I don't know how to word this. One area or topic I think that everyone, or I don't want to say everyone, but a lot of people may have come across, and especially from being a woman in gaming or a woman in any kind of communities, is using the term guys. Hey, you guys.
Hey, you guys.
We even had that issue a few weeks back on the Valkyrie server. Like, we have a mix of trans women, cis women, non-binary, gender fluid people. And some use the term, hey guys, where others start to find that unsettling because of history, because of where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a trans woman doesn't want to hear, hey guys, right? It's not cool. And then when you bring it up, when you mention it, when you say, hey, we don't really want to say that around here or anywhere for that matter, like, you know, I'm bad for that at home. I live in a house of me, my wife, and my 2 daughters. And I will say, okay, guys, come on. Like, I'm awful for that. But when I'm out in public, when I'm in the servers, it's easier for me to modify my language to folks and people and everybody and words like that. But the moment that somebody says you guys and then somebody says, you know, that's not really appropriate to say that, is when you really start to see people getting their hackles up. It's like, I say that to everybody.
This is the don't be defensive thing that Monica mentioned. I think it's super important that you don't be defensive. Own it.
Yeah.
You made a mistake. Change it. By the way, saying folks is old timey and charming. I like saying humans. It's like I think it sounds menacing and villainous. Or like greetings humans. You know, like. Yeah. See my.
Not the only one.
Greetings, humans. Like, you walk up to especially if you're a GM, and you walk up to your table like, all right, humans. You know, like, you've got something sinister planned already. Like, it's perfect.
But as someone who plays the elf, don't call me a freaking human. Insensitive.
All right.
I particularly like Friends.
Friends?
Yep.
Oh.
for like, okay, when you're getting your table together, you're like, okay, friends, let's get rolling.
Like that.
Or if I'm in a particular saucy mood, I will call my players kids. Okay, kids. Okay, kids, get your dice. Let's go. We're
I tend
getting
toward
started.
Peeps.
What?
Peeps.
Peeps? Yeah.
Peeps.
Yes.
And when I am
You are
writing as a
all
professional,
marshmallow and very squishy.
when I'm writing as a professional, I like hey all.
Hell. Wow.
All.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I like Charlotte at home, I'm like, okay, guys, come on, you know. But as a professional, I'm a developer, so I do have to speak to a large group of people, and often a large group of diverse people, cis women, cis men, trans women, trans men, non-binary folks, and so I just will start emails off with, "Hey, all, deadline's next week." Like,
Yeah, you're reading the room.
right.
You
See-
know when it's okay to say, "Hey guys," and you know when it's not.
Yeah.
Yes, and Andrew, I'm sorry if I kind of muddle things for you, because I know that at times in our D&D games I will be like, "You guys," and
We've had some.
I can say that because you all identify as dudes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is like you don't know somebody else's experience, you know, where they come from. You know, I learned really strongly, you know, empathy and, you know, trying to be better. I grew up in a biracial family. I have 2 black brothers, a black stepdad, off of Camp Lejeune military base in North Carolina, in a trailer park where you could draw a line down the center of the trailer park, one half white supremacists, the other half black families.
Yikes.
But the lesson I learned wasn't like, oh, I got part of the black experience. The lesson I learned was I get to step away from my brothers and instantly get all my white male superpowers back. And, like, that was the thing that, like, said, oh, people's perceptions and experiences is a lesson that I'm still learning. Because if I think I'm woke just because, like, I have some interface with, like, the black experience, not even the interface, not even a experience. Like, if I make the mistake of thinking, oh, like, I can, you know, be racially insensitive because it's okay, I have 2 black brothers, I need to get checked, and I need to get checked hard. You know, I think it's important that, you know, you don't know the war going on inside other people. And it's just very important that you're not defensive when you're checked, and that you seek empathy and understanding. That's my jam anyway.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but maybe let's not call your privileges superpowers. That's a little.
Yeah, sorry. I'm being sarcastic.
Being tongue-in-cheek.
Tongue-in-cheek, yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's some asshole out there that actually thinks that. Ugh,
Yeah,
gross.
unfortunately, that's the world we live in.
Now I'm one of them.
I mean, here with pretty clear from the story you just told that you're not. Like, I think attempting to be a decent white person in today's day and age does involve having some point where you're like, oh wow, this thing I didn't ask for affords me what?
I was just saying, some moment of, oh wow, white people are actually pretty terrible.
Yeah, it's both like, oh, I am descended from monsters, and also like, this thing I didn't ask for affords me tremendous privilege. Like, literally what you were just talking about, that when I'm away from my black family, like, all these things change for me. And coming to grips with the fact that that's deeply fucked up, and, you know, what are you going to do about it?
Well, my mom actually had to explain race to me, because we didn't even refer to siblings as, like, half siblings. You're not half related to your brother. We ate the same meals, you know, they're just my brothers. That she had to explain to me why the other kids wouldn't play with us was just to get that pounded into you young, and you just go, that sucks. I just have 2 brothers. You know, yeah, you recognize as a kid that, like, there's some differences, but, like, if you look at my brother,
your family.
Yeah, you look at Rafael and me next to each other, there's a resemblance. And so like, I noticed his eyes and his facial features and all these things about him that I wasn't aware of until I had to be told, hey, by the way, the world sucks. But there's also something to be said for like, and I don't know, I'm not an expert on it, but the notion of like white guilt and trying not to become a victim yourself because you possess some white guilt along, it's hard, and I'm not going to solve the world's problems with one, 2-3 hour podcast, unfortunately, but hopefully bringing awareness helps, that, it's difficult. And when you're playing an RPG, what's the R? It's role. Like you're shifting roles and hopefully perspectives that, we talked about like lines and veils. I hate the racist elf and racist dwarf trope. I hate it. I'm like, I came to this fantasy game to not be face to face with race issues. I just, want to like high five and jump off spaceships and like fight dragons and stuff. And not have to deal with like, oh, you're pretty good for an elf. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, we're just, come on. But then again, I can't be really offended if someone's experience, I can be offended. You can be offended. It's fine. I can't really blame someone if they want to play the elf dwarf thing because they just love that scene between Gimli and Legolas, right? They just want to like emulate that and like that's a gas for them. Which is again why it's important to talk about this stuff. Session 0. Sorry, I just sucked the oxygen right out the room.
Nah, man. I mean, like,
I just
go
had
ahead.
to step back for a second and laugh a little because I am currently playing a racist elf in one of your campaigns.
She's currently playing a racist a racist elf in one of my games. But like, I mean, in this, like, you wouldn't know that until I shared this exact anecdote because I didn't, like, I don't. It's not like a trigger. It's not even like a line or a veil. It's just like, yeah, okay, this is played out for me, a little bit because of some personal experience. But if you're getting fun out of it, then I can empathize with that and go, oh, yeah, it's cool. You're not like slighting against me and my trailer park upbringing.
God no.
It's they're fantasy races, right? This becomes, I think, more pertinent when it's the players. The importance of like understanding the player agency, the player experience. I think is.
Oh, Violet just proposed a topic that I could talk about, which would be curating the setting of the game for this kind of stuff. Like, I think she meant like safety and avoiding problematic tropes and things like that, which would also be part of Session 0. Because especially when you're, I'll power right into this. Especially when you're playing something like D&D, which can have a fixed setting like Eberron, like Dark Sun, like Planescape, all those really cool default settings. But like in the PHB doesn't really. It's sort of like generic Fantasyland,
Greyhawk.
I don't know. Like a Greyhawk type place. Yeah. I can't remember if 5th edition gives it a name.
They're Forgotten Realms now, I believe.
This Forgotten Realms, okay.
Yeah.
Which does tend to have some unique stuff in it. But if you're approaching a generic D&D game where you're sort of playing on culturally understood tropes of fantasy, you can change it if you want to. And in your Session 0, make choices that make that sort of place more comfortable for other people. One of the big things I've seen a lot of people talk about doing that I really enjoy, both from a making people more comfortable perspective and from a design perspective, is divorcing stat bonuses from your race. And like, that's a house rule you can really easily apply. You ignore the stat bonuses from race, and you just say everybody gets 2 + 2s or whatever to 2 things that apply to their class. Mm-hmm. It's elegant. It encourages people to play in the things that they want to do, and it lets you get really cool new combos, like a halfling berserker or something like that. And also it steps away from the idea that like the othering idea that being non-human or something else determines who you are and what you can do, and that's like deeply fucked up. And comes from very problematic roots, which is something I don't think a lot of people, especially white people playing games, consider. And like, that's such a simple house rule. There's can you, like you said earlier, can you think of a good reason to object to that? Right?
No.
No.
Nope.
And you can also in your setting do things like make it welcoming to trans people by having trans characters show up in the background, or even not even just in the background, be important people. Maybe the queen of the country is a trans woman. Like, you can put those things in there. You can make it friendly to queer folks. You can be like, yeah, of course your elves can be black. Fuck off. Like, that's, of course, you can say that sort of thing exists. You can put that forward in your session 0, being like, yes, all these things are here. These things are present. I hope, Violet, that's what you wanted me to say. Or the things you wanted me to go off on.
There is a topic that arises in the Rat Catchers Guild, which is the Discord for the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game, which Violet is a member of. And I'm sure they'd be able to vouch for this, is people try and take that setting, and because it is loosely based upon history, try to impose history upon it. On how, well, you can't have women knights in Bretonnia because there was no women knights in Bretonnia. But hey, guess what? In my game, yes, there fucking is.
My
Right?
my least favorite take ever. Realistically speaking, yeah, tell me about realistically with dragons and magic. Like, how that stuff needs to... yeah.
Yeah, the last big conversation we had last week or the week before was gay people in the old world and how that would have been handled. That was a bit, that was a bit of a mess. So I let those conversations go on until they get out of control.
Well, the hope is that there's a natural understanding that people can achieve by having that discussion, right? It's when it gets nasty or people are concreted in their unwavering, unmoving point, and that's where that problem with being defensive, when you're defensive, that backlash effect happens where anything you say to me, and now I'm going to go contrarian mode. I'm going to play the Melkavi because you said I can't play as Zamisi, so I'm going to try to disrupt your game. Like, that backlash effect, we become spiteful when we're attacked or when we're put on the defensive or whatever it is. One thing I liked about what Monica was saying, with the divorcing racial attributes from the character creation process, that is just kind of a good tenet, a little bit like on a lighter side of this discussion. The notion of role playing versus role playing, ROLE playing versus ROLL playing. When you're removing mechanics that lock you in on that sort of min-max mentality, I gotta play this race for this +2 to be the best version of that class, you unlock people's potential to ROLE play. And playing roles and, again, seeing things differently, that's one of the strengths of RPGs. That's the good stuff. That's what we want more of. Noted.
Yeah. One of the favorite methods of character creation I've come across lately is life path creation. So your character is not solely based upon any kind of species or racial traits. It's what they've done and where they've been. Who they were as a kid, what did they do as a teenager, in their early adulthood, what do they do for work, and that there starts to form the strengths of your character itself, not whether you're an elf and you have higher attributes in magic or a dwarf and you are stronger. It's what have you actually done? What built your character up to where it is now?
I'm playing a Rifts game off stream, just me and some friends. About once a month it works out to, and the life path advancement wasn't something we considered, but I wanted to play a particular this character concept, this sort of hot-headed, biracial character, and I couldn't get the drinking bonus for this character. I just asked my GM, I'm like, he's a hard drinker. Can he get the drinking bonus? He's like, yeah, you're good at drinking. I'm like, hell yeah. Finding, having fun with that, where's this character come from? Like, he's the pro gambler, keeps a bottle of bourbon that's just tea. So he's doing drinking games and trying to cheat people out of their money at the table, and those sort of things where you start to think about role playing. I think that's really cool. Just the life path. I think that's just really cool in general. And I haven't done it myself a whole lot, but I'm going to consider it.
There aren't that many systems that do it. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to port it into a game that doesn't have one, it does require a fair amount of elbow grease on the part of the GM to house rule in, because you have to then create all the life path options. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'm just pointing out that it's kind of work. Also, two things. I posted in the chat my favorite article, which is at this point, 7 years old, about...
Which I have already clicked on.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, about totally destroying that pop history idea of women can't be knights.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic. In fact, actually, it's incredibly realistic to include them. And there's a book called We Have Always Fought, and that article summarizes it extremely well. And I have not actually read the book, but I think maybe I should. Mm-hmm. Also, Violet pointed out a good point that when you do setting curation during session 0, basically opening things like, this is a setting that's friendly to gay people, setting that's friendly to trans people, setting that's friendly to people of color, they exist in this world. It also lets your players signal what they want to see enthusiastically too. And I don't just necessarily mean marginalized people. If you are really into women as knights, you can basically say that. I want to see women as knights in the back. I want to meet NPCs who are ladies who are knights. I really want I really want to ride a horse. I want to be able to purchase and ride a horse. Even if it's something that's simple, setting curation like that lets you go, these are the things I am cool and interested in. Cool and interested in? I think it's time for more wine.
Yeah.
These are things that I think are cool and am interested in, and you can put those out there. Very much like remembering the other side of the X card. It's good to also say these are good things too. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm into boats.
You're into boats. I have a tokenism for boats in all my campaigns now. There's always boats. Also, knowing exactly what hat I'm trying to describe has been the type of hat that does, that's that type of hat. Boats and hats. Boats.
Actually, I have no defense of the hats.
I can't even remember what the hat was. I was like, the type of hat. It's it doesn't really have a brim. It just goes and you're like, it's this type of hat. I'm like, that's the hat. Thank you. Be specific.
Are you thinking of a fez?
No.
Okay.
No. It's more of the...
He was thinking of a cloche.
There we go.
Okay.
She knew the exact story. Oh, man. This is that
of course.
I made you out yourself on the hats thing.
Tonight on the RantCast, what hat is this?
Yeah, what hat is this?
Okay.
Hat or boat? Hat or boat? You were about to say something, Charlotte?
When it comes to some people, or when it comes to having a variety of NPCs in games, I've heard from a lot of GMs that they have an issue bringing in gay people or trans people or people of color because they have they don't want to be insensitive to it. They want to be able to do it respectfully, and they have a hard time doing that if they don't know what it's like to be those people.
Yeah, well, I'm not really a dragon either, so...
But there aren't going to be any dragons watching your stream that are going to be like, hey, you've completely misrepresented dragons.
Why do appropriate dragon?
You don't know this.
I mean, I was being glib. You are correct that if you portray someone in potentially a stereotypical and harmful way, that does real harm to real people. My flippant comment was, if you can stretch your imagination to pretend to be something that isn't even real, you certainly can do the work to pretend to be something that is. And, like, maybe that involves talking to real people, or checking out threads on Twitter, not participating in them, just reading them. Nobody cares about your opinions if you're not a trans person reading about trans experiences. That's just for you to learn. And, you know, if you don't have any friends of color, maybe you wonder why that is.
I guess my issue... If I were describing a group of people, men and women, in real life, I don't think I would want to point out, say, oh, well, this person is trans. So how do I translate that in an RPG setting where we didn't know anything about this person, they just showed up? How do I explain that they're...
How do you populate the world with, like, trans characters without...
Yeah, how did I word this badly? Yes. That's my stumbling block. And yes, I understand that it boils down to do it respectfully, but...
Is this a worry about tokenism, or...
It's not so much a worry about tokenism as... Yes, I know some trans people, but...
That's not their defining feature? Like, I'm trying to help you out here.
It's not the defining feature. Like, they are... I have a friend who is a trans woman, but to me, she's a woman. Like, I've known her for a long time, and when I knew her before she started living as who she is now, like, a lot of the character, like, she's still the same person. Like, the things that I find important about her are still the same. I am calling her a different name now. That's all that really matters in how I treat her. Like, she's still my friend. Oh, I'm doing this badly.
No, I think I understand what you're getting at. Monica, Charlotte,
I understand that her experience is going to color how she sees the world, but the fact that she's trans shouldn't change how I describe her.
Yeah, any input, thoughts, answers?
Let me talk about gay people for a second, because I could do that that's my lived experience.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the easiest one, I think, of the three. So, like, first and foremost, don't kill your gays. That's a bad trope. And if you didn't know that's a bad trope, I'm teaching you this right now.
Wow, I didn't know it was a trope.
Yeah, so it is a trope. So, like, if you have a queer relationship, one or both of them will die. Like, that's a trope. Don't kill your gays. Step 1, don't kill your gays. Step 2, you can do things... This is probably the easiest, because you can do things really, really simply. Like, your D&D adventurers go to the town that has a problem. They need the adventurers to fight the monsters, because the monsters are in the way of their logistical supply line, and this town cannot get food, right? So that's your hook. So the town headwoman comes out and talks to the party, and then reveals in conversation casually that, you know, oh, her wife would be happy to make everyone a meal. There you go, she's a lesbian. Like, and she's an important character, she's a woman in authority. There you go, I've made a gay character instantly, and it didn't change her portrayal. I have also told you that gay marriage is fine, and gay marriage is fine for at least common people.
Alright.
There you go.
Yeah.
And, like, you also really want to avoid your queer characters like doing like if you wouldn't have a straight character do this, don't have a gay character do this. Like, don't have some dude come up and be like, "Hey, fighter, what are you doing?" Like, or whatever. Like, that's gross. Don't fall into harmful stereotypes like that. But do things like, the handsome captain of the knights is like, "Oh well, my husband will be mad if I don't come home soon," and you're like, "Oh well, he's gay. Okay, cool." You can do things like that, and then immediately by just throwing that one little line out that doesn't change the way you portray the character, doesn't change anything about their major points, you immediately make the world more friendly to queer characters existing, and you also like world build a little bit by implying that like these relationships are allowed to happen, and then maybe if your world has nobility, maybe it's more complicated because nobles who marry for political reasons maybe aren't allowed to marry a same-sex partner because of political reasons, not because of homophobic reasons. And then maybe you could have an interesting thing where you maybe the party has to help the princess, convince the king that she can marry her girlfriend or whatever, marry for true love, and so you just queer up what would otherwise be a straight story. I saw Charlotte grinning at me over that idea.
Last year in my Conan campaign, I ended up having a recurring gay couple. There were a couple of traders, and the first time the players came along them, one of them drove into a pothole, the other one fell off the back of the cart and hurt his leg, and from there on in, they were recurring in some of the scenes throughout our campaign, which was kind of fun.
I like to portray a lot of non-binary a lot of androgynous characters. It's I often will just have a lot of androgynous characters throughout my campaigns. Do you think that that's productive, non-productive? Have I been doing it wrong as a straight white male?
I mean, I think by including them, no.
By including them, no. Yeah, and I'm not killing them. They show up and time to kill the androgynous one.
So remembering that people use they them pronouns is important.
Yeah.
Your party has killed them, but that hasn't
Have
been...
they? Oh yeah, the jester, the one. Yeah, the one jester.
We absolutely killed the jester.
Also, if you populate your whole world with diverse people, and you have characters who are on the party's side who are non-binary and villains who are non-binary, then you don't run the risk of villainizing a certain type of person because you've shown that these people exist and can be good and can be evil. Mm-hmm. Just like in the real world. It turns out being of a marginalized identity doesn't preclude you from being a piece of shit. Sorry.
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
I know I do a lot community-wise with Cubicle 7, and like I mentioned before, they just had Wrath and Glory released today, and they've been doing a lot to push diversity in gaming and diversity in their products. Checking out the have you seen the cover yet, Andrew?
I've not. I'm sorry. I've been in house moving torpor.
Right. Yeah. Go check it out. One of the main characters is black. They have an ass-kicking Inquisitor, which is female. They have done a lot of good things to really push diversity. Going through the character creation, the careers in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, they have a lot of diversity there as well between their characters, both gender and racial.
Yeah. I think, this is all just, having good representation and a good spread of the characters, and just to highlight it again, we joked about the dragon thing. You can just talk to real humans and get their perspective, and then just kind of incorporate their views as well. I think that's pretty important.
It is important to note that if you are going to talk to someone about the struggles of their marginalized identity, that can kind of be exhausting.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't expect them to do that. At the very least, you should do something cool, like take them out to dinner.
Yeah, it's not their responsibility to educate you. And it's important to remember that.
Mm-hmm. So
if that person is your friend, they might be willing to do so because they like you. Mm-hmm. But you should still offer to at least buy them a drink. Come on.
Yeah, doing solid. Yeah, so I have to subscribe to everyone's Patreon here real quick, I think, because you're helping me represent the community. No, I heard something that really resonated with me recently, which is like, you want to do good and you maybe don't know how to interface with it. Just ask me what I think and support that. Is pretty decent. But like you said, it can be exhaustive to be constantly having to educate folks and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting. A really interesting point. I've heard you actually bring it up on your podcast as well. Take them up for dinner, buy them a drink. They're doing work. So
yeah, I'd also like to share that a lot of my wisdom comes from my friends of color, and you should especially go read James Mendez-Hode's blog. He is a professional acquaintance and friend of mine, and he's a very smart guy, and taught me a lot of this stuff that I am now sharing with you.
Oh, thank you. Swyhander's been killing it in chat here. So I think we've covered a lot of stuff here, and you're talking about like the social aspects of identity, empathy, sort of like that. I'd like to end on a couple like of sort of gaming tips. You're sort of improvising when you're playing. You can be learning some of this on the fly. Is there any sort of like improvisational tricks that you might use to like go into a game when you have some of these like lines and veils established, you have a diverse cast, and now you need to interact. So we've got the representation, we've shown the stuff, we've done our game zero, we've done our zero session, our pilot episode, and now it's time to actually interact. What are the main sort of tips for improving through this all and having a great experience for everybody? And just because we are running up on the time here, just like quick tips, and then we can get out for actually playing the game. Learn from Mendez. I'm going to put both of these links, by the way, in the RantCast notes, so those of you listening back, you can actually find the We Have Always Fought article linked earlier, as well as James Mendez-Hode's blog.
Run that question by me again.
Oh, so okay, we've talked about we've talked about session 0. We've talked about populating and curating the world for sort of diversity and a positive experience for everybody. Now it's time to play. What are just some just general tips? We don't have to stay on the this core social issue, but just general tips for now playing the game, being mindful of others, and having an eye towards enjoyment.
Oh, okay. So, how do you get started?
No.
Past, we're talking. What do we do on session 1 onward?
Yeah, session 1 onward. Just the tricks to because RPing is essentially improv, but
yeah.
you can prepare to improv, right? And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about. For instance, I usually keep a list of about 20 names just in my notes in case the party is suddenly very interested in this bartender I described 1 second too long. Tricks for actually going through the game once we've actually moved on to game 1 and we continue to play. These maybe just a couple tidbits from each guest here.
So are you looking for tips for keeping a long campaign going, or tips to keep communication open?
Tips.
D all of the above.
Tips for engaging in the game, maybe.
Yeah. Let's be a little bit more specific.
A little bit more specific. Well, one I've personally been struggling with lately is burnout. GM burnout, player burnout. You're trying to continue through threads. Any tips on fighting off burnout then, to be specific?
Stop. If you are burnt out, stop. It is okay to pause the game and stop playing.
Oh.
If your table is into enjoying the game you're running, they will understand that you are no longer feeling it, and they will pick it back up when you are feeling refreshed. I think a lot of people feel like they need to power through burnout, and that's the opposite of what you want to do when you are burnt out. Like, that's only going to make it worse. You have to step away and put it down. Like, if it's the campaign that you're tired of, maybe run something new. Maybe play a game that you've never tried before and restart your brain by forcing it to learn something new. Or maybe just go on a hiatus for a month. Like, but you do also have to understand that if you pause that, lots of us are busy adults with busy lives, and maybe someone's schedule will change, they won't be able to play anymore. And that's a bummer, but that's also the reality of the situation. But I think if you're burnt out, you gotta stop, and you gotta change what you're doing, whether that's play a new game, whether that's, okay, it's board game night from now on so that we don't break our routine. Because I think my tip to maintaining a consistent long campaign is that you have to maintain routine. You gotta meet every week, and you can't miss it for more than 2 weeks or you totally lose momentum. So sticking with it, and if it's burnout and you want to keep hanging out with this group because they're your friends and you like them, maybe it's a board game night now, or maybe it's a Jackbox night if you play online or whatever, and so you continue to meet up and interact with each other, but so you don't lose that momentum. And then once you feel refreshed, like maybe a couple weeks of TKO and you're and Quiplash, and you're like, you know what, I feel like I can get back into it again. And once you're refreshed, you can come back to it. There's nothing wrong with stopping.
Katie or Charlotte, anything to add or extrapolate?
This is something that you've done in the past, and I really appreciate it. And I know that you typically ask for us to give you character backstories or character insights over the course of games, and I think those might actually be helpful in combating burnout as well, because it's not solely on you to be creating anymore. It's also the responsibility of all your party members to kind of go more in depth into what's actually happening in the game.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, I like sharing the creative.
Sharing the creative burden. And I don't mean to say that it's, a burden, because if it is a burden, then, like Monica said, you just gotta walk away for a while, but...
Anything to add, Charlotte?
Yeah, kind of links into what Katie was just saying, was creating the world doesn't always have to be on the shoulders of the GM. When we come across new characters, I get the players to name them, for better or worse. After the first few times doing that, I've started to put restrictions on them. Like, okay, we are in the north of Conan's world. These are like Vikings. Let's name them a little bit more towards what they would actually be named.
Twab. I'd always name them Twab. That's our placeholder name.
I think something else that might be helpful in something like that is when your characters are creating their backstories, have them describe the towns or cities that they grew up in. Like, maybe their parents were farmers. Well, what did they farm? What did they grow?
My girlfriend always calls people Beverly in our Exalted games. Twab was always our go-to name. I think it was from some silly module. One of the characters' name was Twab, and we just we couldn't stop laughing about it. So ever since, every random character that we couldn't think of a name for was Twab. We've covered an awful lot. Any sort of random soapbox moments anyone wants to get on for RPGs in general? The subject of just sort of the social aspects of it. Anything? I guess we can start. Go back around, Charlotte. Do the sort of reverse order.
Nothing really. Kind of linking into what we're just talking about is it baffles me on how some GMs put so much effort into prepping their games. It seems like an insane amount of stress that they put on themselves to make sure that their players have a fun experience. I we'll go into a game half an hour prior and throw something together and just run with it. I am doing the most prep I've ever done now for the stream on Saturday, making notes and studying the system and trying to get everything down than I have ever done for any game. Like, honestly, my Conan stream, half an hour before my game started, I was grabbing stat blocks and having a brief outline thrown together for what they might come across. We would start the session, and then they would just run with it.
Right on. Right on. I always find that there's a beauty and simplicity when it comes to prepping a campaign. If I have like key characters, I used to when I was young and naive. I would write out every line of dialogue that the character could possibly have, and then I would like wait for the characters to ask the key phrases so I could be like, oh, I'm glad you asked, and then I would like continue with the thing like just on loops of dialogue like Deckard Cain, and I learned to not do that after putting in way too much effort, and now it's just like if I have a character, I put in a single bullet like quotation, like that gets across, kind of how I think that like an encapsulating phrase of how that character would interact with just like, it could be something like cut off their heads, like, oh, I know that the gruff, mercenary type has, this motivator, this drive, and that's how they interact with people, yada, yada, yada. And I don't have to, do a bunch.
Yeah.
But that's my personal shorthand. I think every GM's going to have their own little shortcuts.
I'm starting to do that a little bit more about just getting cards together for an NPC with their personality and their drive and just running with that.
What do they want? This is basic, basic narrative, basic storytelling. What does the character want? What do they want in the scene? What's stopping them from getting it? And that gives you a lot. I mean, that's really straightforward, and you'd be surprised how long you can carry on dialogue if you just have those sort of three things.
Yeah.
Katie?
Oh shit, I completely forgot what I was going to say. Here we go.
Ah, the dice
Tower.
Nice.
I think my advice is geared more toward players than GMs.
Mm-hmm.
But things are going to go wrong for your character, and that is where you find out what your character does best. And that, to me, is really the fun of an RPG.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The exploration of the character. And then Monica?
Yeah, man, I got so many soapboxes. I have a podcast.
Maybe yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one, go listen to Bonus Experience, because a lot of things that I've said here, I've also said on the show. Some good GM advice. I think I will repeat the mediocre advice that made me so mad I started Bonus Experience, which is like, hey, did you know you can talk to your players?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Remember that your players are a resource, and they are the greatest resource that you have. And sometimes be willing to just throw your own idea out the window for whatever better thing that they came up with.
100%.
Like,
Players
sometimes
are going to
you'll
come up.
I don't overplan, but sometimes I'll like make connections in my head where I'm like, okay, the scheming Duke is related to this guy, and they both have a plan to assassinate this other guy, and I'm like, that's what's going on in the background, and that's in my head. And then someone is like, I think the Black Knight is actually the Duke's daughter and has been this whole time, and I'm like, well, that wasn't what was in my head, but it is now.
You just cross it out. You're already crossing it out.
Yep. I'm like, well, you got me.
Didn't think you'd figure out my incredibly elaborate, excellent plot. How smart you are.
Or I just don't tip that hand, and I'm just like, oh, interesting thought, and in my head I'm totally rewriting the whole story, and then now I'm going to seed in hints that the Black Knight is in fact the Duke's daughter and has been this whole time, and then it looks like foreshadowing, and people are like, how did we guess? And like, just be willing to seed ideas, be willing to move things around, and be willing to cut things. Like, I will read you a line from a as of yet unreleased BXP episode, which says, "Just also remember that you're running a game, not writing a novel. Your brilliant story ideas kinda don't matter."
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, ouch.
No, it's perfect.
But good storytelling, this is good collaborative storytelling, and the fun of playing an RPG is that your idea will be bounced off of someone and come back to you different, and like the interplay between here's my idea and here's yours should be fun.
You gotta lean into
Which is
that.
not to say that you can't tell a good story, because you sure as fuck can, but you remember that you're doing it with other people, and that's the most important.
That is 100%, I think. I write, I've got a couple things published out there, and, you know, I've been paid actual money to write stories, so clearly I know what I'm doing. The thing, why, if I am such a brilliant novelist, or fantastic writer, why do I gravitate towards RPGs as a storytelling format? It's exactly what you described. That back and forth, leaning into your players' ideas is something, you know, when you write your brilliant, you know, Oscar bait RPG story, you know, you're kind of trapped inside your head with yourself. You know, you don't have the benefit of other minds refining or, you know, editing what you're doing, because every writer can do with extra editing.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, let's be real. Like, how many hit TV shows and movies started off as a campaign in an RPG? The Expanse is one of them.
Huh.
I think. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be
No.
wrong.
You said it on a podcast. It's right. You said it on a podcast on the internet. It's got to be right. It is.
Yeah, Violet has confirmed it is.
Yeah.
The fun and fascinating thing about the collaborative storytelling aspect of playing an RPG is that while you are in the moment, you are both the author and the reader at the same time. You are both the director and the audience at the same time. And so, like, the end product is not a book or a story or anything like that. It's an experience. So, yes, of course you're telling a good story, but, like, having something tangible isn't what you get out of an RPG. What you get is the experience. You get something extremely intangible. And, like...
And a bunch of inside jokes.
And so many inside jokes, which are an important part of the experience.
Yeah.
But, like, I can tell you a whole bunch of really memorable things that came from, like, my Exalted games that I ran, where, like, it was based on decisions the characters made. Like, I used to run Exalted games monthly with a whole bunch of my friends, and we'd play, like, all day. We were much younger, and we could do that. And I would take a break. Like, I would have a sort of a seed of a plan at the beginning, and then I would take a break. People would go get dinner. I'd take a shower. I'd think about everything that happened, and then I'd come back down and run the rest of the game, like, into the night. And, like, that middle point where I just digested everything everybody had done, like, I had only seeds for the beginning, not for the second half, and everything that came in the second half of the game was a result of what happened in the first half. So, like, there was, like, no second half prep work. It was literally all based on the decisions people made ahead of time, and weaving that experience between their choices and what I choose to throw at them because of that created something really memorable. So, like, listening and not trying to enforce strictly your own ideas and, like, engaging in the things that other people are putting out and their decisions and the things that went wrong and the things that went right are how you make a really memorable, really excellent game.
Right.
I'm very good at this, just saying.
Yeah. I mean, you almost like you're a professional of it or something. No, there's just there's something for me that's magical about this. I can't get enough of the narrative of basically being told that my idea wasn't the greatest, and then, like, leaning into my players' ideas a lot more than I think they realize. Quarion marrying the dragon was one of my all-time favorite things that I didn't plan. You know, like, changed the entire world of my game, and, like, I just ripped pages out of a notebook. Just like, these are gone now. That's the thing that happens here. You know, I feel like I need to explain that for chat gang. See, one of our party members, on purpose, core to his character, did not want to play the bard who sleeps with the dragon. Like, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to be just like a nice, great person, yada, yada, yada. So this wasn't even, you know, this would have been pretty much a line, like, never gonna, you know, this isn't the thing, like, he's not gonna sleep with the NPCs, this is not that bard's thing. An opportunity arose later on, where, like, they had to trade souls for a key and stuff like that. Really, like, mythic sort of weirdness. You know, like, fairy tale, like, it wasn't so much in, like a creepy way. It was just, like, you know, like, esoteric currency, blah, 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 get a key. Well, like, marriage is kind of, like, giving you a soul, and, like, and so, like, courts this dragon for 1 year to marry her, like, it was, like, completely on the party, and it was really funny. Experience, and I'm like, well, okay. And then that evolved way later on to where they essentially, like, now they have to choose this, like, ruler for this vacant seat, and they're like, oh yeah, we know, you know, Corion's wife, like, she's now, like, this main matriarch of this entire world, all based on this, like, sort of improv that the whole party did. And I'm just like, that was my idea, man. I couldn't have forced that for any reason. You have to kind of, in some sense, you have to lean into what the parties do. Let them have their successes and let them be clever and figure things out and tell their own story. No. My bad.
Nope.
And let them wed that dragon. Indeed. But it wasn't like the cringe bard, like, you know, sleep with the beholder thing. Like, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. That's what made it so funny and memorable.
Don't kink shame.
All right.
But yeah, see, just be open to learning. Don't get defensive. All right. So real quick, where can everybody reach you? Getting all these awesome insights. I know we've talked about bonus experience real quick, but reset it one more time for everybody, Monica.
Oh yeah, you can check out bonus experience. It is bxpcast.com. I haven't updated the website in a while, so if you also go to Misdirected Mark Productions or misdirectedmark.com and look up bonus experience, you will find the full list of episodes there. Or you can just look up bonus experience basically anywhere you can find podcasts. We have tried to get on pretty much every platform. And if you want to follow me and hear more of my own personal stuff, you can follow me on Twitter at ZenithSun.
And what's a really awesome RPG they should be looking for coming out down the line?
They should be looking for Exalted Essence, which I think should hopefully have a Kickstarter towards the end of the year. But the Big Sick sort of made the whole Kickstarter schedule a little weird. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. The goal was to have a Kickstarter out by the end of the year, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And definitely for release by next year.
And in the meantime, it's a really great time to play RPGs, folks. Katie, if people want to check you out online or catch any of your opinions, where should they do that?
If you want to hear what I pretend are my opinions but are not necessarily, you can follow Pick a Side Stupid. It is on most major podcast platforms. There is a Facebook group where if you're interested in getting into how the podcast is run, you can join Pick a Side Stupid, a comedy debate show on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at Kate Russian, and I think that's about it because, I don't know, I don't have personal projects I want to plug here.
Fair enough. And then Charlotte?
You could find me all over the internet at Foxfire22. That is FOXFYRE22. Foxfirestudios.com is my website where I'm posting up a whole bunch of the Valkyrie Gaming stuff. I got Valkyrie Gaming on Twitter. For those of you that may have missed it, Valkyrie Gaming is a gaming group for all women, non-binary, and gender-fluid folks. You can find the invite to our Discord on the Twitter, which is Valkyrie Gaming 0, because not first. And starting this Saturday, we have our first Learn to Play stream where we're going to be playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And the way that this is going to work, hopefully, we'll see how all this runs out, is every 2 weeks we're going to be playing a new game. So not only is it new players learning systems, it is also me as a GM learning the new system. So that way we can help demonstrate all aspects of running a game for the first time.
It's really awesome, and from a bunch of different perspectives of different systems. So in the end, folks are going to be able to really find the game that resonates with them. I think it's brilliant.
I hope so.
And I'm just going to real quick shout out to Chat Gang. Thank you so much tonight. Chat Gang, as always, you are the show within the show. I'll see you all around. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.